unveiling truth. We drown in booze. Mike and his crew unravel the ruse. Conspiracy theories, we tear them apart. With beer fuel logic, we spark the dark. From moon landings to lizard kings, we'll pass them all with the truth that stings. Spirits high and minds ablaze, we'll debunk the lies in an alcohol haze. Drunk debunkers, in the night we rise, shouting truth with bloodshot eyes. The Drunk Debunk Show, let the crazies beware. We'll shatter illusions and leave secrets bare. Secrets bare. Secrets bare. Dive into madness, where shadows collide. A podcast of chaos, where truths are denied. The Drunk Debunk Show, unraveling lies. Mike and his guests, unveiling disguise. Conspiracies tremble as we break through the haze, unmasking illusions with a thunderous blaze. Electronic beats intertwined with steel, unleashing the truth with an unstoppable zeal. Welcome to the Drunk Debunk Show, where we expose the secrets that they don't want you to know. EM meets metal, an explosive blend, unexplosive blend, unraveling conspiracies until the very end.
Hello and welcome back to the Drunk Debunk Show. I hope everyone is having a fantastic Thursday. This stream is going to cap it for a few days here at the Drunk Debunk Show, because tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and you know my wife and I'm gonna make her a nice dinner, and I'm gonna treat her right, make her feel special, and then go to bed at 8 o'clock at night because I have to leave my house at 5 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, to go to, drum roll please, New Jersey. Going to New Jersey, the armpit of America, to meet up with FTFE and root him on as he destroys his opponents in debates. And then also meet Austin Whitsitt and get his the trading cards signed. Hello everybody, and welcome to the old school Drunk Debunk Show logo. My other sweatshirts are dirty, so they're in the wash. So we got DC Dano coming on tonight. I'm gonna be sending him the Zoom link in a few minutes so he can give a presentation on the Battle of the Beams, which I'm pretty excited about. I know nothing really about it, so I wanted him to come on the show and talk about it. He has a whole presentation. So guys, if you guys have any questions for him during the presentation, Please, super chats you guys know how it goes. Super chats get priority. Tagged. If you tag me in the questions, I'll do my best to get them all answered as well. Hello, Cuppy. Hello, Emma. How are you guys? We got CK, Emma on YouTube as well. Monkey Cat Pat. Hello, good evening, and cheers. We got CK Sean Hawkins. Hello. We got Martin H. We got Scuba Drew. Let's go. We got Silent Dave. I hear you loud and clear. We got Clive Wells, Mark Van Wisco. We got Michael Cooper, Tay, Martin H, Coco Rose. We got Al Trucker, Crazy Razy, only the craziest. And we got Coco Rose. And we got George Hands, Aardvark Maximus. Oh, smooches. We got Steve 6464. Hello. We got Martin H. I already said that. And Jesse Torres. Howdy. Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I did, because I felt very productive today. I did a lot at work. We had a very motivational meeting today. That's right. Motivational meeting. It's called the lunch. Oh, my invisible Dos Equis. You like? So good. They named me twice. It's all right. There's so many names. But yeah, of course, Martin H. Of course. I called you out twice because you're that good. Hello, dudes and dudettes. Yo, what's up, Max? How you doing? Welcome into the chat. So I don't know much about the Battle of the Beams, so we're going to learn a lot. So let me go ahead and I have it all drafted up. So let's go and hit send. Dan has quite the interesting backstory of his life. I'm not gonna ask him to reveal anything about his life that he has revealed to me already, that he doesn't feel comfortable with talking about. So we have, he says, I just finished putting together a presentation to refute the current alleged globe killer of Battle of the Beams. So he has the rebuttal to the alleged globe killer, which I'm very excited to hear. You know, obviously the right side, right? Because anything that says it's a globe killer is obviously wrong, because the globe is the reality, as we all know. And I'm so upset about my freaking. Does this work? Hey, there we go. All right. I am also looking forward to Dan's. Oh, I need to text him to let him know I sent the invite. What did my wife do? Oh my God. My wife is very, very, very rude sometimes. Okay. Oh, I was texting him. Good Lord. My ADD is like all over. I sent the link. Join at your leisure. All right, so for tonight, we're gonna take a shot with him because he got a fancy shot glass just for tonight, which is really cool because he got one that's the shot glass is awesome. I'll let him show you it. It's it's really funny. Nick Bine, X and Y beams, Wotan Freya radar stations. Why is my furniture floating? Careful not to trip over your Among Us. Amongness. All right. I love his name on Zoom. It's so good. All right. Yo, what's up? How you doing, bud?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. All right,
let's see. I'm going to turn on my video here and kind of get a little set up.
Yo, I love your name, The Unfornicated. It's great.
So there's actually a story behind this. I served in the Navy, and we are known for, let's just call them colorful metaphors, usually of the 4-letter variety.
Okay.
The F word can be used as everything from, an adverb, an adjective, a noun, a verb. Take your pick. Mm-hmm. Well, when you're in say mixed companies with some higher ranking individuals.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, that doesn't always fly. So, so when to express your frustration, we have acronyms for everything. So we have things like FUBAR and things like snafu. Well, one of the things to say that we're trying to basically unscrew something up is to say we're going to unfornicate it.
Perfect.
So when I was putting together a project, I'm like, well, if there's anything that I'm doing about stupidity, it's flat Earth. So unfornicating it is the perfect term.
That's fantastic. I love how you're using a reference to your time in the service. And actually, I that makes a lot of sense now, because one of my old followers from like 5 years ago, his username was Snafu. So that makes sense now. Now, when you said that, I was like, oh, okay. Well, that makes perfect sense now.
And since it's still early, if anyone wants to know what those actually are, you can look them up. But it's funny, you can actually look up unfornicated or unfornicate in the Urban Dictionary, and it gives you a very apt description.
Perfect.
Which includes this part up here.
Unfuck yourself. Perfect. Oh, whoops. My bad.
So,
really quick. So I hate to interrupt, but I just want to get these super chats. Monkey Pat for $6.66. Hail Sagan said, thank you so much. Says, how do I super chat? All I want to say is, hail the Drunk Debunk Show. Great community. Cheers all. Yes, thank you. Cheers to you, Monkey Cat Pat. Clink. Can I knickerbind glory joke again, Clive Wells? I'm assuming that's a joke that I'll get by the end of this presentation.
Yeah, it's this. Yeah,
Right.
we'll get into the presentation. It's a long, drawn out one.
Perfect. I love it. I love long, drawn out. Let's go. As long as I learn something, then I'm doing something right. Bill Tetley for $5 says, just finished a pint of Infinite Wishes from Smog City Brewery, and I'm feeling happy. Happy Thursday, Moy. Thank you, Bill Tetley. Happy Thursday to you as well. You said fuck on purpose. Oh, shit. God damn it, Calder. All right, cool. All right, so if you need to share your screen, you can do that. And
Well, since your ADD and my ADD are both going on,
yes.
it's,
Oh yeah.
you can't really see it here, but
I can.
it says, let's get cracking.
It does. Yeah, it has a picture of the Kraken on it. It's fantastic. All right, let me put the music on, and I'll share with. Can I share with you the music? I don't know if I can.
Oh, that's all right.
All right. Well, we need.
I'll just
to
follow your lead.
All right. All right. Here we go. All right, time for a toast, guys. Everyone, grab your drinks, grab your water, grab your soda, grab your bong, grab your joint, whatever you're in partaking in today.
In a tavern
And we
old and cozy,
celebrate.
where the
We
whiskey
celebrate
flows
together
so free.
to cheers
Gather round,
the Drunk
get
Debunk
merry,
Show and everyone who's
laugh,
made it
glasses for
fantastic,
a tale
amazing,
about
and just the greatest place that you could ever hang out on a Thursday night, Wednesday night, Tuesday night, and sometimes on Friday nights. All right, guys, thank you so much for being awesome. To you, Dan, to the Drunk Debunk Show. Cheers.
Oh, we'll drink and debunk till the early morn.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Oh, man, what are you drinking tonight?
12-year-old Appleton Estate Jamaican rum.
That's right. Yeah, you told me that 5 minutes, like 10 minutes ago, you told me that.
And that's only because, Sailor Jerry and Kraken is not really shooters unless you want to wake up with a hangover.
That's fair enough. I got the Woodford Reserve whiskey tonight. That's one of the only shots I'll be taking tonight because some people have to work tomorrow.
Myself included.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. All right, now that that's out of the way, cheers, everybody, and the floor is yours, sir.
I'm just looking for. There it is. Big button in the middle. God, you can't really miss it, can you? Unless it's me.
Make sure if anything you have has audio, make sure you click share audio. Okay, perfect. All right,
And
guys.
I'm not that sophisticated. Come on.
Perfect.
But I actually took inspiration from your 4-hour stream you did of the moon landing debunk. So I figured,
Oh,
well,
you watched that?
Okay, maybe not
You
all
skipped
4
through
hours.
it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't. When I tried to rewatch it, I was like, "How did people stick around for this?"
yeah, it's like 3.5 maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have got up to use the bathroom, in the middle. So, but no, it was that's kind of where I got my inspiration from.
Perfect. All right. Awesome.
All right. So, all right. Basically, just a little quick introduction about me. I served in the Navy in a rating that specialized in radio and satellite communications, as well as the exploitation of said communications. So things like HFDF. Basically, I was in signals intelligence and cryptology. So I was stationed on board an aircraft carrier, got multiple deployments under my belt to combat zones, which is always fun. You get better pay. It's tax free. And yeah, and it's through that lens I kind of looked at this. And when this first started coming up, I was like, someone else will take care of this. I don't need to jump in the middle of it. But then as I watched more and more, and they were using it more and more, and no one was stepping up, I'm like, well, shit. I guess I'm gonna have to like start doing my foray into this mess. And this is definitely a passion project of sorts, and it's also in a way a an example of Brandolini's principle or the bullshit fallacy. Let's put it that way.
Beautiful.
So tonight's topic, as everyone sees, Battle of the Beams or Kanikabine. It is the silver bullet to finally expose the globe lie once and for all. And the flat earth proof without refutation. I introduced to you Battle of the Beams and Kanikabine. Now, if you have spent any amount of time on social media, you have undoubtedly heard of the Battle of the Beams. But for the sake of tonight, I'm going to try to gloss over and get everyone up to speed on it. But we're talking about a conversation about geodesic surveying. Somebody brings up Battle of the Beams. A debate about observations of celestial bodies. Someone brings up Battle of the Beams. Basically, go back to MC Toon and Peter's debate with Alan. A dinner conversation in Punta Arenas before the trip of a lifetime. Someone wants to bring up Battle of the Beams.
Yeah, was that Winston? I feel like.
Yes, it was. and since we bring this up, Dave was there, and Dave has actually done. Dave McKeegan has done 2 videos on this. One was the actual refute, and the other one was a response to statements made by Alan and the other Ether cosplayers and their idea of how this works. So he did an admirable job. Don't get me wrong. They're great videos for a great understanding about how these things work. This is just my wheelhouse. This is what I do. This is what I've done. This is kind of like, I can take it one step further. Besides just saying, oh, it's diffraction, I can show you how it diffracts and why it diffracts. So it's. I don't put it in the same level, but let's talk about it's like general relativity is a refinement of Newton. Well, this is my refinement of McKeegan. Let's look at it that way. So, regards to this being a globe killer, don't believe the hype. All right. As with most flat Earth proofs, this is really nothing more than a new version of Samuel Rowbotham's "We See Too Far." Sound familiar?
Yep.
So I guess what we'll do is, since you have the bar open, grab yourself everyone a drink. Make sure you tip your waitress Mike, and let's unfuck this stupidity, shall we?
Perfect.
All right. So prologue. Everyone studied World War II. Everyone knows the basis of it and the lead up to it and everything else. But in this story, we're just going to say the year is 1940. England's isolated. Poland has been invaded. France has been overrun. The British Expeditionary Forces just took the giant ferry caravan from Dunkirk back to England. Basically, the only obstacle preventing German ground invasion of Britain is the RAF, or the Royal Air Force, and their ability to maintain defensive air superiority. So now there's a book called The Battle of the Beams, and we'll get to that in a second. But this is directly from the quotes, or from the book. So I'm actually abusing this, and I love these kind of quotes. So Winston Churchill basically said the war will be fought as expected on land and at sea and in the air, but it will also be fought on the airwaves. It will be fought between scientists on both sides at the forefront of knowledge. And this is the key of this subject as a whole. So, what is Battle of the Beams? Okay, well, I personally am not a big fan of the name, but since everyone else on the Flat Earth side uses it, I feel compelled I have to use it to prevent confusion, because there's more than enough confusion on that side. Yeah. We don't need to confuse them anymore.
What's the hypotenuse?
Yeah, exactly. It's measured in degrees. So this is a name used to describe a scientific and intelligence arm race between Germany and Britain. And at this time, due to necessity, like we saw innovation occurring at an incredible pace. Now, part of the secret war of the scientists and everything else in the intelligence was more or less trying to figure out what the enemy was doing and how to counteract it, as well as develop your own innovations and things like this. So it's basically any advantage you can get in wartime, right? Now, don't get me started on the jet fuel hoax and wartime and jets and military jets, but that's a different topic for a different night. So basically, what this is part of the Battle of the Beams is a long-range radio beacon, navigation beacon that was codenamed by the Germans Knickebein. It meant meant bent leg or crooked leg. And when you look at the antenna from the top, you can see that it's like V-shaped, so not real original, but the Germans weren't exactly known for their originality, to be honest. But this Knickebein is the basis of their globe killer. Now, let me go backwards a little bit here, and just so you kind of understand what it is. Knickebein is based on the Lorenz Blind Landing Beacon, which is the grandfather of like the ILS system. It's for instrument landing and things like that. So in poor visibility and poor weather, pilots, excuse me, have a hard time seeing the runway in the airport and things like that. Well, a radio beacon gets them there, and now they can see it. Now they can land. Now, it did this specifically by providing an audible tone because of the overlap of two separate radio signals. So that overlap, that middle tone, is what we call the equisignal. So if we look right here, basically the airplane flies down where it says continuous, this middle signal, and if it knows if it hears more dashes or dots, it knows if it's to the left or right of the signal it needs to be in. It's kind of an ingenious thing, and to be honest, it was invented in, I think, 1932 by Lorenz, and by 1937 it was operational at 7 different international airports, as well as every airport and military base in Germany. By 1938, Germany had basically said, we're going to pump the brakes on exporting this because, we want to take over the world. So they were concentrating on refining it for military purposes. And it was during this refinement that German scientists discovered various nuances associated with VHF and UHF frequencies. Now, when we talk about the radio band, the military specifically uses HF, UHF, and SHF and higher frequencies. The reason why we don't use a lot of VHF is A, that's where all the licenses are for the FCC, but B, it's also because it's a shoulder band. It can sometimes act like HF and be reflected off the ionosphere, which the UHF doesn't, and sometimes it acts like UHF and that it's almost directly line of sight. So it depends kind of like where you, and the funny thing is, I mean, you're in IT like I am, there are no absolutes when it comes to radio. Everything is like gray areas. It's more like a speed limit on the highway. You can go over it in rare occasions when you know there's no cops. So it's kind of the same mentality. So from the LFF or the Lorenz system, right? An innovative adaptation was literally made. They decided instead of inbound, let's make it outbound. We'll do the exact same thing, but we'll make it outbound. So now basically our bombers can follow it all the way to the target. Sounds like a great idea. It really, I mean, look, it was ingenious. I'll admit. I mean, it was literally one of the best innovations that they had because of the legacy of what Knickebein created after the war. And so the interesting thing was that the Lorenz system was kind of low-powered, small antennas and things like that. So they were going to need much larger antennas and much larger transmitters. And when I say much larger, I mean a lot larger. So, as I mentioned, this is the FE proof that kills the globe, right? It's been used everywhere on social media, at least on X, since August when they found this. There are no less than 4 videos, well, 6 if you count McKeegan's, on YouTube. And the first of it was actually by Taboo Conspiracy, published 3 years ago. Now, I've watched all these videos, some of them multiple times, because, I don't want to be accused of being a straw man. But I watched them, so you don't have to. But I know our community well. If you want to do your own research, they're not hard to find on YouTube. I'll just say that. Yeah. Just use the Battle of the Beams moniker.
Yeah, there you go.
So the funny thing about it is, while I listen to these videos, there are some quotes that I decided to mine from these videos that were just so much fun. It just works on flat Earth. It's never been more flat, boys. A complete obliteration of the heliocentric model, as far as I have heard.
What's it? Our buddy.
Yes. Oh, by the way, while we're pausing on What's It real quick, you know, you have the ranch dressing thing. I had made a meme last year with the help of a friend that we have the Hubris Valley Ranch,
Yeah.
now in your convenience store, so you can so you can use that. MC Tune has used that a few times, and I take great pride in that. It's been used on other things. So shout
Beautiful.
out to Cole for the help on that. And yeah, my idea, but I don't have the skills, but I can show that to you later.
Right.
And it destroys the globe, guys. It's irrefutable.
Hmm.
Great. Actually, I put it's refutable. So all right, well, I'm having a day. Um, and here's my personal opinion of all of it. So let's discuss the actual claims. Okay, so they're claiming that it would be impossible on the globe due to the frequency used and Earth's curvature. There is no propagation method that would induce error, or any propagation method would induce errors, and therefore it would not be useful as a navigation aid. They also base all of their arguments and all of their calculations off of the RAF measurements of when they located the beams in Spalding. Now, there's a whole other story about the efforts of a 28-year-old physicist named R.V. Jones and what hurdles he had to get over to convince Churchill that these beams existed. And when I get my channel online, I'll actually do a specific video on that because to me, it's interesting coming from an intelligence background, but not everyone enjoys it. So I kind of cut that out for tonight's thing because it's a great story, but it doesn't really pertain to flat Earth per se.
Okay.
And then, they say that the target is Derby. And the reason why the target is Derby is because that is a huge logistical hub as far as train works go for moving things around the country. We're talking about they make all the locomotives there. They make the rolling stock, and also home to the Rolls-Royce factory, which manufactured the Merlin V12 engine. Now, these engines were used by the Spitfire and Hurricanes and were basically instrumental to mounting an air defense against the Luftwaffe. They also say it's, even though Wikipedia says it's more or less line of sight, by the way, not just Wikipedia says that, every radio manual says that. No. According to Alan, it is direct line of sight.
Thank you, Alan.
We'll come back to that in a minute. Oh, because it's direct line of sight and because it hits the horizon, the bottom of the radio signal will be clipped. So therefore, the center of the beam as it hits the horizon is now the bottom of the beam is basically what they're inferring. I'll show that in a second.
Okay.
And the last one is that Knickebine had pinpoint accuracy, resulting in untold damage. They, quote, smoked the Rolls-Royce plant and, to rubble, basically.
Wow.
And we're going to address that. We'll address each and every one of these things, not to worry.
Okay.
So now the next two slides are the crayon drawings created by the Ether cosplayers as part of their proof. Not to worry, we'll revisit this again. We'll also, some of these I've actually converted into text, so it's a little easier to follow because this way your eyes aren't jumping back and forth here. But the specific things I kind of want to point out here is just going to be that this is the horizon. And because of the horizon, you see that the signal just continues as a straight line. So I guess they think this is a string or I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of hard to understand as far as what they believe and not believe. Mm-hmm. But this is from where it just works on flat Earth. So because it's flat, it goes straight across, no problem. Now, there's some truth to that. I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, it could work, maybe. Now, before we go much further, I'm going to be a little pedantic, and I'm going to do a little housekeeping.
Okay.
Knickebine is referred to as radar in multiple posts and in fact, in MC Tune's debate, it was referred to as radar. I lost count how many times. I ran out of fingers and toes and everything else. So if it was a drinking game, I probably wouldn't have woken up the next morning. Let me just kind of set the record straight here and kind of like maybe set the stage for their understanding of this topic. It is not a radar. It has nothing to do with radar. Radar implies that there is a reflected signal and a receiver that can say, hey, that's how far it is.
Okay.
Knickebine had no receive capability only. It was transmit only, specifically. Okay. Now, this might be pedantic, but I'm just trying to set the stage and set your expectations of your understanding of this entire thing. I guess this could be kind of poisoning the well, if it weren't true. But, yeah, anyway. So, the crux, this is where we start getting a little more fun here. So, the crux of their arguments and their calculations is based on RAF measurements, as I said before. Now, what are these RAF measurements? Well, in June 21st, despite skepticism from the entire war cabinet, that 28-year-old physicist, R.V. Jones, somehow convinced Churchill of the existence of Knickerbein. Churchill immediately ordered that all efforts be made to locate the beams and, if found, develop countermeasures. Simple. So Jones had the idea of the prime target for the Luftwaffe, the Rolls-Royce manufacturing plant that we talked about, where it was the backbone of the air defense for Britain that Germany needed to basically squash so they can start a land invasion. Now, on a cloudy night of June 21st, an Avro Anson, which is this plane that you see right here, with an aircrew consisting of Flight Lieutenant Buffton and Corporal Mackey, took off from RAF Winton and flew north. Due to the secrecy, because this is intelligence, by the way, they were given very little information. They were only told basically to locate transmissions with a Lorenz-style characteristics. And he gave them the frequencies to look in. Now, as with most things in the intelligence world, luck basically plays just as much as a role as tenacity. And as luck would have it, the beams were located. So I said we were going to revisit these claims over and over again. So here's the flat Earth claims and in the house of cards that it's based off. And I'm going to highlight the specific ones that we're going to go over. So here we're going to talk about the calculations at Spalding. So to understand kind of Knickerbein and how it mattered, basically, is there was a critical knowledge gap of the radio spectrum between Britain and Germany leading up to World War II. Germany conducted significant research and experimentation with what we call VHF now, or what they called shortwave then. Britain instead concentrated its research and development on lower frequencies like HF, or high frequency, which is the band below it. This is the range of ionospheric propagation. You can bounce things off the atmosphere. And it was also the same frequency range of their home-built radar system called Chain Home. Appleton, which is one of their leading scientists at the time, actually got a Nobel Prize for his work on the ionosphere. And it led to, obviously, untold advances between then and now. Now, because Britain's research was kind of, mainly confined to lower frequencies, the RAF did not actually have access to radio receivers or transmitters in the frequencies that Knickerbein were in. So to accomplish the goal and fulfill the order from Churchill to go locate these beams, Jones had to resort to purchasing civilian U.S.-made Hallicrafter S-27 receivers from Webb's Radio in Soho and modifying them to throw into the Anson airframe. Now we're talking about it's now gone from AC to now it needs a new power supply for DC. And it's basically being strapped to a shelf at this point. So, and just to emphasize this point further, when it came down to the developing countermeasures, there was no transmitters either. There were no transmitters that they could basically buy off the shelf. They had to use modified medical devices that emitted high frequencies to treat pain and muscle conditions.
Really?
I mean, look, in wartime, MacGyver takes hold, right? You you do whatever you can. So literally, they took these things that were used for, for managing pain and muscle conditions and said, hey, these are using the frequencies we need. Now we're just going to take the transmitter, we'll push them through this amplifier, and now, out it goes.
Yeah, make it work.
Hey, look, in wartime, look, there is no pretense of wartime except survival. So you do what works, basically, is what happens.
Well, that reminds me of the Gilligan's Island episode where Professor makes a shortwave radio out of a coconut.
Exactly. Exactly. Coconuts for everything. I mean, maybe they think that's what this is. 2 strings and a coconut, and that's how this works. I mean, that would make sense. I mean, it's just a really long wire that they're rolling out. Yeah. So when they located the beams, Lieutenant Buffton came back and he filed a flight report. And the report basically stated that the first beam was located near Spalding, actually and that's where the map is here that you see, and at an altitude of approximately 5,800 meters, and it was measured to be 400 or 500 yards wide. Then the second beam, because this is what's required for Knickerbein, is actually makes an X over the target. You have 2 different beams, and where they intersect now becomes the target area. So a second beacon was located with the same characteristics or similar characteristics, not the same because it was different frequency. was located near Beeston, which was right about here, about around Nottingham. Now, Robin Hood was not part of this by any means, so we don't have to worry about that. So, but here's the question. Should we really call these measurements? I mean, to be honest, let's think about this. How was the signal measured? It was measured by some guy with with headphones on and a pilot who's guesstimating his ground speed on a cloudy night. What variables did they account for? What did they have a device that actually measured signal strength? None of that is known.
Okay.
So how much more equipment did they throw into this airframe that they didn't have access to make a measurement? But let's look at some of the variables that basically the RAF was going up against to call these measurements, okay? And we're going to start with the aircraft. Now, the Germans used the aircraft, the Heinkel HE-111. It is a medium-range bomber. It has twin engines. It has a high ceiling. It has a crew of 5, pilot, bomber, navigator, radio operator, and gunner. Now, its design is very important because it has 2 armored bulkheads between which is where the operator sat. So it also had a very regimented training on how to use the beams, and the equipment was basically, the antennas that were mounted to it were designed specifically for those wavelengths. The equipment that was in it was specifically designed for it. This is obviously the best case scenario. Now, since the RAF wasn't, didn't exactly have a lot of planes to spare, this is the opposite end of the spectrum. And when you have the best case scenario, this is probably the worst case scenario. And let me explain why. So its role as a reconnaissance maritime patrol. See all the windows?
Yeah.
See the absence of windows?
Yep.
Okay. Its speed was a lot slower.
Mm-hmm.
Its ceiling was a lot lower. And it had a crew of 4. But we know it only had a crew of 2 on the night it was found. So not compartmentalized, many windows, ambient noise from wind and engine and exhaust and, thin metal sheeting, and ad hoc modifications, as well as not even be told what to look for, just Lorenz type signals. You starting to see the picture that's being painted here?
Yeah. And what I see here as well are the antennas. So
Yes.
I see the ring antenna here.
Yes.
And then the antenna off this little. Oh, there. Okay, so there it is on the bomber. Okay.
Well, and this isn't even the antenna that was used, and we'll come into that. They actually have a trailing wire antenna that it would be rolled out. It's almost like on a winch that we rolled out behind them.
Gotcha.
But you're right; they're actually splicing into these already existing antennas that are on the aircraft.
Gotcha.
That wasn't designed for VHF.
Right.
But wait, there's more. Let's talk about the receivers. This is where things get off the rails quickly. Now, the difference between the receivers are just as varied as those of the aircraft. It's going to, and I'm going to kind of keep this at a high level. I don't want to delve into nerd porn because no one gives really a shit about the different types of vacuum tubes that were used. Okay? No one cares. But for someone like me as an engineer, I care.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to simplify things, but not too simplified because the devil's in the details, or Satan's in the details, whatever you want to call it. So starting with the receiver, which is the Funklanda FUB1. By the way, I took 4 years of German in high school, but I have not used it in 30 years. So generally speaking, I could probably pronounce these, but I'm definitely not going to butcher it for everybody else. So just bear with me. So starting with this receiver, it was purposely built for the Lorenz military applications. Okay. It used advanced circuit design. It had multi-stage amplification. It had integrated antennas and had extensive shielding from EM interference. So being an IT guy, it's like they use plenum cables versus non-plenum cables in the overhead.
Yeah.
You understand that mentality, right?
Of course I do.
Okay. So now the SU-27 receiver was a civilian receiver. It's built for use in controlled environments like a home, not 20,000 or 12,000 feet up in the air where it's -10 degrees. It featured a broader frequency range. Oh, let me rephrase that. So let me go back. So the FUB1, the frequency ranges for the antennas were actually set on the ground by engineers before they even left. So they had a set frequency for the receivers.
Okay.
This one had a dial for the receivers. And it also had moderate signal processing capabilities, and it lacked EM shielding. In fact, and it was spliced into existing systems. And in fact, the receivers had little to no EM shielding. Now, you and I have dealt with Cat5 cables who have not had shielding. We know what happens to those signals that go through that when it's going by a light or whatnot. It's a hellhole.
Yeah. even my power strips underneath here, I have to separate all the power from all the data cables. Yeah.
Right. So, so let's think about this for a second. So in order to basically call these accurate measurements, all right, specific challenges had to be overcome. First, it had to be measured multiple times, right? It had to have gear that actually measure the signal strength. But some of the things we needed to talk about is ambient noise, the radar operator experience, the receiver sensitivity, EM interference, the antenna type, even the age of the operator, because it was an audible tone, needs to be in the consideration. Now, we're talking about a corporal in the RAF, so chances are, I mean, the kid was probably 19, 20 years old, so maybe not so much in this case. But if you're going to do this multiple times, this is what you would do. And also, you would also test it with multiple antennas. You would test it with multiple altitudes. There's all sorts of different variables that you address. Now, I believe pictures speak 1,000 words. So this right here, this nice big open area bullpen where, you know, there's no shielding or anything else. This is where the radio operator sat, directly behind a navigator who sat directly behind the cockpit with all these windows. So he had a great view looking out.
Yeah, sure did.
And I don't care how good your headphones are. Jesus, the ambient noise in that would have been shitty. Now down here is a Henkel HE111.
Look at how nice and cozy that looks.
It's nice and cozy. I mean, he could put a hammock up in there.
It looks like there
is a hammock. He was okay. So the radio operator also doubled as the overhead gunner. So there is a window above it.
Oh, cool. All right.
But the window above it, when the window below it, I mean, come on, that's two very different environments. So considering all these complications, would any reasonable person consider these measurements or observations?
No.
Right. These would be observations, not measurements. There's your two choices, right? So even if you were to say, yeah, it could be measurements, or would they be accurate measurements? And would you base that on your globe-killing silver bullet proof?
Nope.
Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page here. So this is, all right. So now that we talked about how they, they're using these measurements as a basis of all their things and why that's, let's say, fundamentally flawed. I mean, you could say asinine. You could say stupid as hell. I mean, take your pick. You go, be creative.
I'll say, I'm not very creative, but I do have some. I was trying to think of something clever, but let me just go over these super chats really quick.
Go ahead.
Tim Davison for $2 says, "Battle of the Bulge. Mine's bigger. I win." Oh, beam.
Oh, hey, hey now.
And then we have Monkey Cat Pat Pat for $5 says, "So this radio nerd knows more about radio waves than a flurf. I thought flurfs knew everything about anything."
Okay, I'm not an expert, but I have expertise.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a difference. I don't claim to be an expert because there's always something we can learn, right? That's the way we always look at things.
Yep, exactly. All right, go ahead.
All right, so we're going to get to the technical portion now because, geometrically, this is, besides the fact that they based this, obviously, their entire calculations on this stupidity. Now it comes into like, well, it's still not geometrically possible that this works. Well, that's why I'm here, right?
Yeah, let's look into it.
So let's look into it. Now, before I'm going to try to refrain from delving too far into radio nerd porn. Okay, look. Not everyone is licensed by the FCC or have RF experience. I get that. And while I try to take a high view, I kind of got to warn you that I'm going to get I refrain from simplifying it too much because like the Freemasons are in the details, right? And the devil is in the details for us to find. So let's flash back just 2 minutes ago, or I don't know, a shot or two ago, whatever it is we're up to now. I'm glad I didn't offer up the drinking game of using the Ether Cosmology name that I have for them, the Ether Cosplayers, as a drinking game. Otherwise, I don't think neither one of us would wake up tomorrow.
Love it.
So we covered their measurements here, so that's why it's grayed out. Now this, let's call it a chapter. Okay, this is the famous "we see too far" portion.
Okay.
Now, you remember this kindergarten art project? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, while it's not necessarily ready for the Louvre, I'm sure their mom has it on their fridge. I mean, that goes without saying. Now, I took all these things and kind of put it in text form to make it a little easy. I also looked at, listened to their videos, watched their videos, and kind of put things together to kind of come up with their claims as a whole. Now, I hate reading slides, but for all intents and purposes, I'm going to kind of go over this just because I want everyone to understand what it is. Now,
Yeah.
what we have is we have the claims on the left, and we have my questions, or what I would say a reasonable amount of questions should be on the right. Now, so if we go back, remember they said optical line of sight is 31.36 miles. I use metric for whatever reason, but they don't want to do that. So they gave us a tower height of 200 meters because the benefit of the globe, right? Because we need a benefit. Reality needs the benefit to make this work. So the curvature would clip the radio waves at the optical horizon, which means the center of the beam would now be the lower limit of the beam. And the airplane had to be in the beam to listen to it. It also, now this is where things get really weird.
Okay.
I need you guys to think of this in a 3D model. So there's a horizontal width, right? There's a horizontal part of the beam, and there's a vertical portion of the beam. So when we talk about diffraction, well, diffraction affects both of them. When the electrical field or the polarization of the signal is vertical, it's called a vertical polarization. And then there's a horizontal polarization. Where the electrical field is polarized kind of acts how things like diffraction and refraction work, and how the signal is basically diverges from the transmitter. And we'll get into this a little more, but I just want you guys to think of this in a 3D space. And we know how well flirts work in 3D spaces.
Not well.
No. So they assume in part of this that it is a symmetrical signal, meaning that if it's 400 to 500 yards wide, that means it should be 400 to 500 yards tall. But then you go on social media and all of a sudden someone counteracts that, because that's what flirts do when they understand a subject, is now it's unlimited height, but it's still only this wide. So we'll address both of those, but it's like, can you guys pick one, please, so we can kind of go off this? And then they specifically said, when they're talking about Derby and stuff like that, which is their target, is that based on the distance and based on their calculated, based on the RAF measurements of 400 to 500 yards wide, it would have a beam divergence of 0.066 degrees. Now, I'm surprised they didn't add another 6 just to be pedantic about it, because, our favorite number.
Yep.
Hail Sagan. But they're saying that's the beam width. And they go on to say, well, even though that the Luftwaffe source document said it's only a 0.3 degrees, which is, significantly wider, that's the upper limit. So it could be down here. But yeah, their proof is those same measurements that we just took apart, like Legos.
Yep.
The center of the beam would be 18,000 meters with a total of 12,000 meters above the maximum ceiling of the bomber. And it would require a refraction value of almost 0.8, or basically 5 times the radius of the Earth. Now, let's pause for a second. If it's 5 times the radius of the Earth, if it's not flat, and we're talking about that it's 5 times the radius of the Earth, let's say the Earth is just larger. Not that it is. I'm not a concaver or anything else like that. Don't get me wrong. But that doesn't imply flat, does it?
No. It implies there has to be some curvature there.
So what evidence is there? So here's where the questions go. What evidence is there that HF frequencies do not refract? It does. What does the real world need the benefit of the doubt for measurements when we can actually use the real measurements? And what scientific evidence is there that curvature clips the radio signal? There isn't.
There you go.
Is there a mathematical calculation to confirm the vertical beam width of the antenna? There is. Are radio signals symmetrical? No. Is there a method to calculate the vertical beam width based off measurements? Kind of like before. Yes. So we already talked about the complications of their measurements that they're basing all their numbers off of to begin with. So let's just kind of sit there and say, well, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they somehow made it work. Okay. Why does the bomber need to be the center of the beam? Is there another mechanism that would cause radio waves to change their behavior from line of sight? Now, these are all questions that we're going to answer in the next couple slides. It's going to be pretty quick. Refraction. So we're going to talk about specifically two different parts of this. Now, refraction is basically the bending of light waves as it changes for a medium. Things that affect refraction are going to be things like humidity, water vapor, things like that. Just like our visual spectrum, radio refracts.
Yep.
For some reason, flirts don't think that. And then somehow they gave me that, but then said naked mind wouldn't work. Whatever. Look, there's online calculators that give you this. And we're actually going to use those online calculators in a moment to show you exactly what it is.
Let's go.
Okay. So it does refract. In fact, look, here's the optical horizon. Here's the radio horizon. Wow, that looks a lot like curvature to me.
Yeah, it sure does.
So the fact that they use an optical line of sight without even knowing what a radio horizon is or what refraction is affecting that or anything else. In fact, they actually said in one space specifically that let's talk about this radar Kinnicabine because it doesn't refract. It does. Okay, there's empirical evidence on this, including it's stuff that we've known since 1902 and was expanded upon in 1936 by T.L. Eckersley from the UK. But just the lack of this knowledge is like, it's egregious to me. Like, this is basic radio stuff. And it's, to me, it's like calling Kinnicabine a radar. It's like, oh my God, you guys are fucking retarded. So radio signals are not limited to the optical line of sight. Okay. Radio waves refract. All right. And they, generally speaking, is going to be like, it's caused by atmospheric refraction, and it's the variation of what we call the vertical gradient, which is the water vapor in the air and things like that. So it diffracts downwards. Now, there are weird anomalies that we can refract upwards, but those are few and far between, and all those do is just cause people like me headaches. And it's not like something you plan for, because it's not, that's like, that includes things like ducting, inversion layers, and all this other stuff. Like, there's a whole other parts of this that we're not even close to talking to. Now, interesting thing is that there's actually Luftwaffe documentation that says a lot of things about this system. Now, it gives measurements. It talks about it gives graphs on its usable region. It's based on actual measurements and signal strength measurements. And it also talks about different ways of how to navigate on it and different variables that affect it, including things like humidity, and that the range would not only decrease with humidity, but it'll probably be less in summer where there's more humid over the UK. Again, refraction. Now, the other type we're going to. Now we're going to talk about diffraction.
Okay.
Now, here's the funny part about this. Now, if you watched the if you watched the recent MC Tune debate on MDD and stuff like that, you would have heard a lot about how diffraction would induce an error into the signal. And no surprise, this is a claim not only wrong but without proof, that because of diffraction, it affects not only it affects the signal as a whole, and all of a sudden it wouldn't be available for that pinpoint accuracy that they needed for that year-long bombing campaign in Derby. Okay. Now, I'm trying to think what I was going to say. Oh, so while it may induce an error, because it does, it does in fact an error, because it's vertically polarized and the signal is basically taller more than it's wider, the diffraction is basically affecting more on the vertical axis as opposed to the horizontal axis. It's not a completely exempt, but it does have a little bit of variation, and it's basically can be accounted for. So as we're talking about this, is the diffraction is basically the bending of the waves around obstacles. So whether we're talking about a mountain, we're talking about a building, or anything else. Now we're talking about curvature. Now, specifically, we're talking about curvature because we're going to get into where the locations were of these and what their actual view was of Britain from these locations. Okay. Here's a spoiler: there were no obstructions. So because of diffraction, is what we have is all they have is But what we have is the vertical polarization helps it hug the curve of the Earth. So what we have here is when you send a signal. So we have the radio horizon that we were talking about previously. Like, we have the optical horizon here at A. B is the radio horizon, which is further because of refraction. C is another radio horizon. So what happens is when you send a signal along the very low to the level of the Earth, right, within, like, say, the first kilometer of air, and it goes across that. What it does is the only obstacle that it hits is the curvature. But it hits at such a shallow angle, it basically creates like almost a strong reflection. And this reflection is basically like bouncing the waves off the ground. So, and it travels in the same direction that it reflected off of, because, it's basically perpendicular. So because the second travelway is now traveling almost parallel to the surface, and it follows the ray more closely, because it's basically like starting a new transmission from that point of where it intercepted at the grazing ray. So now it's going to have refraction as it continues through here, and it's going to hug the Earth even further before it finally just goes. But this, now granted, we know this is not the scale.
Right.
This is a hell of a lot further than this.
Yeah.
And so that secondary ray is also subject to refraction, so it bends even more as it goes through. Now you can start seeing that optical horizon they're talking about is a lot further than it was. And because it was a lot further, that means it's not going to be as high. But that's not it. That's not all. So this form of diffraction in propagation is more than just math. It is an art form. There are so many variables and so much math, complex math that you have to do to even engineer this. There's a reason why the entire Luftwaffe took not only the civilian district, portion of their Air Force themselves, and every scientist who had any understanding of this to make this work. So one of the biggest things that we can do is, if I'm trying to re-engineer this, is I can put in different variables to actually model what the radiation pattern was. So this is what this signal looks like when it leaves the antenna.
What? That's so cool.
So, but here's the fun part about this is that this provides us with a lot of information without really knowing it. And if you don't have experience with this, it may seem like, ooh, look, pretty colors, and that's about it, right? But I'm going to explain it. So when we talk about vertical polarization, it's very narrow, but very high. Okay. So here's the top view of the signal, very narrow. Here's the horizontal view, very high. Makes sense, right? So this is what you would expect for a navigation beacon. Otherwise, if it was symmetrical and it was 400 to 500 yards wide as it was high, they could just have fighters sitting in that same 400 yards the entire time waiting for bombers to show up. What's the point of using that for a bomber aid if you have to be that low? I mean, if it was on a flat Earth and it was that high, it would be like 1,200 feet above the ground. Yeah, I don't know any bombers dropping bombs at 1,200 feet high, because there could be a lot of problems. Yeah, there's problems with that.
Make themselves blow up.
Right. So because of that vertical polarization and the height of that signal, that's what you expect for basically a navigation beacon. So they can basically be at different altitudes and still hear the signal. So the comical thing as we get into this is so some of the other things that we have to talk about. So besides being vertically polarized, the antenna was highly directional. We'll get into some of the antenna things and everything else that goes into this. So now I didn't have to actually model this. There's actually a software that does this. It's called 4NEC2. It's an antenna modeling software and things like that.
Okay.
Somebody else did this who did a lot of research. He was quite the fan of the Halocrafter S27, and he actually did a lot of the work that I borrowed. Well, me and the Thirst both borrowed, because he did. I mean, I could do a dissertation on this if I was doing a PhD. The amount of work that he did. And he's great at it. He doesn't necessarily go into some of the propagation modes. He just talks about how it was built and where it was from and everything. He doesn't really go into how it or why it works. He just goes into kind of like how it works and why it was used and things like that. So now, if you notice, there's two pictures here that use that same software.
Yeah.
Now, as we look at these two images, we kind of notice how they're a little bit different. Okay.
Yeah. One's a little lumpier.
They're a lot bit different. Okay. Now, the top picture is usually what's used on social media by Ether cosplayers. This is what we call a free space model. This is a theoretical. This is what, if you have no obstacles, no ground, this would be the equivalent of pointing an antenna straight up, because there's nothing above you, right? It's just straight up. This is what the signal would look like. Well, this is on the ground, transmitting at, basically at horizon level. It is subject to ground reflections and things like that we talked about with the grazing ray and the angle of incidence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So instead of having this nice big, bubble here, we have two bubbles. We have a shorter bubble and we have an extensively long bubble.
Yeah.
This is basically the ground, the grazing ray and the ground wave propagation portion of this.
Right.
So while this frequency wasn't necessarily optimal for ground waves, usually lower frequencies than what we are dealing with, it doesn't mean it can't use it because remember, nothing's absolute. There is no, there is no cutoff points. So there are ways to overcome some of the limitations of this, but you just have to go bigger and better to do it. That's all. But just the fact that they use this and don't use this and don't understand what this little lower bulb means, it's like why?
Yeah, it's dishonest.
No, yeah. So
rule,
it's like
first rule of
Right.
Flurf.
right, and it's like dishonest or ignorance. You know what? Take your pick. It really doesn't matter. Either way, it's a proof, right? So I guess it shouldn't really be ignorant.
Right.
Now, when we talk about radio, there's a multitude of variables that, and I'm not going to list all of them, but just some of them just to kind of keep in mind is you have to think about the frequency, you have to think about the characteristics of the transmitter, you have to think about the receiver, how the antenna is designed, heights of the transmitter and receiver, the terrain and the ground connectivity that it goes over for it to reach 450 kilometers. And I'll go into what actually is actually required to do the engineering of this in a couple slides.
Okay.
So let's talk about the actual sites. Okay, one of the sites that we have is Cleve. Now this is Cleve right down here. It's right on the border of the Netherlands. It happens to be about 84 meters up. And then the other one was in Stolsberg, which was actually up here by the Denmark border and just basically shot across the North Sea.
Okay.
Now, why were these two sites selected? Well, this is the panoramic view from Cleve looking out towards England. You notice there's no peaks in the way. All these are over here. And if you know anything about the Netherlands, you know that it's full of flooded plains and everything else. So there's good ground connectivity because not only is there ground connectivity here on the English Channel, there's ground connectivity here that helps propagate ground wave propagation.
Right.
And the other one's shooting over the North Sea, which is nothing but salt water. Oh, that sounds like helpful. So this red line is actually the view from Cleve to Derby directly. Now Derby was only one of their targets, right? They also targeted London, which is a little further here, so obviously that's going to change that view. They also went over after Portsmouth, and they also did, a couple other places that were obviously of value. But this is where we get the actual measurements from. The actual measurements of Cleve are 84 meters high. We don't need 200 meters. Let's use 84. So based on the calculations of from the online calculator, we can see that the optical horizon is 35.5 kilometers. We can see that the RF horizon is 41 kilometers. They say, well, we'll give you 200 meters and the horizon's 51 kilometers away. And of course, they don't know about our RF horizon, so they just omit that fact.
Of course.
So now what we're doing is like, well, why would this be significant? Why would we go to a lower to a lower level? And that's because what we can do is we can see the signal characteristics by looking at the measurements from this graph. Now, this graph is from a Luftwaffe memo dated 5 May 1940, and it's titled "The Navigation Use of the Long Distance Transmitters." Now, if you see the shape of the usable region, don't worry, we're going to come back to this. Okay, I just want you to just kind of familiarize yourself a little bit with this. So what we have here is this is the transmitter here. What we do is we have basically distance across the bottom. We have altitude across the top. And up here, to use the same x-axis here for the distance, we have the beam width if you're looking from the top down of the signal. So say it was a light. You could see how wide it is. So at like 200 kilometers, we're looking at roughly 1 kilometer wide, And it says that the beam width is 0.3 degrees. And again, this is what they're taking into. Now, this is secret. This was classified. It was not to be taken in the aircraft. So radar operators were known to take notes because, reasons.
Yeah. There's memory is shit. Yep.
Yeah. Especially when you're in an airplane surrounded by a bunch of noise and you're trying to bomb somebody and you're getting shot at. Things happen. So let's zoom into the far left corner. Now, I took the same thing from the last slide. We have 84 meters, 35, 41. We also have the Ether cosplayers, their horizons. And we have the Stolsberg Hill, which is another site that there are only 2 sites operational during this time that created this. There's a third site, but it was kind of pointing more towards Spain and Italy, and it wasn't really useful in this aspect. So I marked the heights here to kind of zoom in. So this would be the optical horizon for Stolberg. This would be the RF horizon of Stolberg. This is the optical horizon for Cleve. This is the RF horizon from Cleve. And according to their 200 meters benefit of the doubt measurement, this is the optical horizon, or this is the horizon that pertains to for their benefit of the doubts and everything else. Now, why would they use 200 meters? Oh, look, the line's starting to diverge.
Yeah. Look at that.
Wait, let's give them 200 meters just because we have the benefit of our, the goodness of our heart, because they need it.
I love the clown emote.
Look, they're all clowns, dude. I mean, let's call it for what it is, you know. So let's just use Cleve, okay? Because it looks like Cleve is the basis for this testing that this was done. Because we can start seeing that the line starts diverging a little bit here, it gets a little thicker and stuff like that. So if we're going back to Monkey Pat Pat's Battle of the Bulge, we're talking about it gets a little thicker right through here. Now, if the optical horizon clipped the radio waves, this usable region line right here, right, should be right here and be a stark cutoff.
Okay.
Wow.
I
don't see that. Do you?
No, I don't see that. No.
Okay. So, because again, if the optical horizon from Cleve at 84 meters is 35.5 kilometers, so each one of these lines is 20 kilometers, so that's 20 and then 30. Okay. So then here's 35, right? Here's 41. Even if we use the radio opportunity, even if it was a direct line for there, it would still be way over here. Now, that's kind of showing like it's not really behaving like they think it behaves.
No.
It looks a lot like diffraction and refraction. We see refraction as it extends past. We see diffraction as the signal diverges further as it goes along. Don't worry, we're going to come back to that graph and spend a little more time on it. Now, let's get into the little complications. If I was to engineer, and you're in network, so you understand this. So I'm a network engineer for an internet service provider. I do engineering work all day about optical loss and amplification of optical signals and photons and all this other fun stuff, different types of fiber, different wavelengths and everything else.
Yep.
But I started in radio. So it shouldn't really surprise anyone that there's, so you're familiar with being networking. You're familiar with ITU standards. There's certain standards made by the International Telecommunications Union that everyone follows.
Right.
Well, it shouldn't really surprise you that there's also ones for radio.
Of course.
Communications, right? That's part of the T in telecommunications. Now, this is all based on science and based off engineers and everything else. And what they do is they have working groups that decide that here's the recommendations or standards that we're going to publish for everyone to follow. Now, if I was to engineer Kinikabine today, I would have to consult no less than 8 different ITU recommendations.
Really?
And if you've ever read these, this would be a long read because it would put you to sleep in a heartbeat. I'm an engineer and it puts my ass to sleep. And to be perfectly honest, like as engineers, we don't like doing long division and calculations and integrals and stuff like that because it's boring. And I don't want to refer to the Sommerfeld integral and the Huygens-Frenzel principle and the geometrical theory of diffraction. I would much rather have software do it for me.
Yeah, exactly. It's 2025, man.
Right.
We can automate it.
And that's what I did. And I'll show you what I did when I came up with the link budget and everything else after the fact. I didn't ever really include it in this, but I'm just kind of wanted to kind of point out there. There's software that we can use to do this. If you know where to look. I mean, if you're in it and you know where to look, and if you're an FCC licensed operator, you know exactly what these are. These are VOA cap. These are, these are all sorts of different RF toolkits when you talk about point to multipoint or point to point or things like that. That gives you what the coverage tool is. So you don't have to do all the math. And it usually errs on a conservative side. So you can kind of fudge with the edges a little bit like, it's close enough. Then when you go out in the field and put it together, you can say, yes, it is close enough, or no, it's not. So if I wanted to engineer Kinikabine today, I wanted to achieve a 450 kilometer shot at 30 megahertz. So between 30 megahertz and 31 megahertz, which is that HF VHF end of the range. Okay. And I couldn't use ionospheric propagation. I can only use ground waves. Well, I would select sites that were closest to the ocean because we're talking about that the saltwater conductivity is more than, I think it's 100 times better than even the best ground conductivity. Okay. So obviously they used 2 locations that were closest to the ocean. Right. But there's a whole other different other variables that we need to talk about. And I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to list them because I don't want to go into each one because we're talking about this is where the nerd porn comes in and gets boring. But we're talking about extreme transmitting power. Like Kinikabine had a transmitter with an output of 3 kilowatts. That means it consumed 20 kilowatts. That's the equivalent of 15 to 20 households.
Holy shit.
It needed a massive antenna. This antenna was 90 meters long and 30 meters high. It was almost the equivalent of a football field turned on its side.
Wow.
Now, that's just the hardware. Now let's get into like some of the things that we need to discuss. We need to discuss things like we talked about, ground conductivity. What's the best ground conductivity we can to get the reach? If we run into anything that doesn't have good grounds, it can attenuate the signal. Therefore, it won't reach as far. It won't be as, it'd be in the fringes. We're in a sea of static, and who knows if the bomber will hear it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to take in consideration atmospheric losses, or what we call free space loss. There's equations to do that says, okay, well, in our atmosphere, we take these averages, and this is what we expect it to be. We also have to start talking about specialized aligning techniques like wave tilting, which is how you point the antenna, near the horizon. You start at the lowest level possible, so you can basically get that curvature and the refraction to kind of extend it further, so you can get that reflection and that grazing ray that continues it even further from that.
Cool.
And then now we have limitations. Well, since we talked about it already, we have Earth curvature. Well, okay, let's just pause for a second. Why do I have to worry about Earth curvature if it's flat? Is the Freemasons writing my radio recommendations? Or the Jesuits?
Well, they clearly chose your background. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you got the bricks back there.
Well, it took a while to build that. I was building that all this morning, by the way.
Yeah, it looks good. I like the one that's like kind of dangling there. It's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard it was to get the actual like wrecking ball in through the window to be able to kind of knock out the piece I needed in the middle? I mean,
wow.
I live in an apartment. The management was pissed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So real quick, so we're talking about signal fading, we're talking about curvature, limitations, stuff like that. So to do this today, this would require extensive planning and modeling to optimize the system. And even if we had all the optimization, all the experience, our engineers to design and build the system, to go 450 kilometers using ground wave propagation at 30 megahertz, even over saltwater, and even optimizing for everything else, would be a very complex and expensive, but we're talking about wartime, so expense is kind of thrown out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have significant engineering challenges. It's not to say it's impossible. It's not to say it doesn't work, but it would be challenging.
Right.
And even with all the optimizations, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that the reliability, the availability, and the performance just might be questionable.
Okay.
Keep that in mind for a second. We'll come back to that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So let's recap another thing. So, these are all the same things. Let's look over here. Oh, look. Okay, we know that refractions, that the signals refract, that we actually have online calculators that calculate that it's 30% further. Coincidentally, the same thing that Germans found when they did their testing.
Mm-hmm.
We use we use the real world, the reality-based elevation numbers, so we can figure out where things were. At the same time, identifying where maybe some dishonesty was. We had some, we talked about how the ground doesn't clip the signal, and actually showed a graph that showed the signal that was done by the Luftwaffe, who actually designed the system and deployed it. So I probably should take their word over, say, some pilot in the RAF over England.
Yeah.
Who was listening in a wind tunnel and had no idea what the hell he was looking for, and was using an ad hoc design that was basically a MacGyver version, and in a plane that was, basically a toy.
Yeah, we're given no information.
Yeah. Right, no information, by the way. Just go up and look for these signals that sound kind of like this. Let us know what you find. And only do it once.
Yeah.
We know that radio signals are not symmetrical in practice. I didn't really touch on this, but when we talk about polarization, a vertical polarization or horizontal polarization, there's different uses for each one, but most things, especially in communications, are vertically polarized because it's easier to control some of the variables. It's easier, things like that. Horizontal polarization is great when you're doing like long distance things, especially over like the ionosphere and stuff like that, because any deviation to left or right is accounted for in the width of the signal as it goes up. Ground wave propagation, and we talk about ground wave propagation, which would allow the radio wave to follow the curvature of the Earth, which goes against completely what they said that it can do, because they understand this shit,
right?
And they're all basing it on, let's call them what they are, observations.
Yep.
which in all essence is an argument from ignorance. So I don't know if you want to pause for a minute.
Yeah,
any questions.
Yeah, let's guys, if you have any questions for Dan, definitely get them in. But I do have some super chats. We got Scuba Drew. Hello. Scuba Drew.
Scuba, how you doing, Drew?
Yeah, Scuba's awesome. Says, I bet Facatzoid won't touch this stream. Great stuff, DDS. Yes, no, it all goes to Dan, man. I'm just learning. Yeah, thank you. So Monkey Cat Pat Pat for $2 says, hi Facatzoid, I know you will be reviewing this. Beautiful.
Hi, Facatzoid. It's nice to see you. If you'd like me to discuss it with your panel, pick a neutral environment. And in fact, let's put it this way. Let's just say this totally. Any flat earther who wants to use this as a proof and they would like to have a discussion or debate about it, there's an open debate 2v2 because I have a civilian radio operator. He covers more the civilian side. I cover the military side. The funny thing about military is we don't have to abide by, rules. We can just transmit over anybody we want to. I don't have to worry about the licensing or anything else. I can just do what we want because it's in the benefit of what we call national security.
Awesome.
But he knows more of the other stuff and the amateur radio operators and things like that he does. Now, coincidentally, he's trying to do an Earth bounce. I've already actually done that using military equipment. I'm sorry, Admiral, that wasn't me. There's other things that are going on. So open 2v2 invite for a debate about anything they want to bring up about radio waves. And that includes Witsit's long list of Ace High Network, skip zones, VHF distance records, Battle of the Beams, and any other topic you want to talk about. By all means, open invite, pick a moderated neutral channel, and we'll show up.
Beautiful. I love it. All right, there's your challenge, Flat Earthers. Then we have the grumpy old man for $2 says meteor burst communication only works on a globe. I don't know what meteor burst.
So while this is a directional antenna and that you're pointing it in direction, so meteor burst would be almost like you're talking about like AM radio, FM radio,
just like
TV broadcast, stuff like that, UHF, VHF. It's omnidirectional, means the antenna sits there. It's a giant antenna in the air, and it just goes everywhere.
Yeah,
all directions, as opposed to this, which is pointed.
Yeah,
like we'll go into the directionality of this too.
Like the cartoon antennas on the top of the radio stations. Right. You see the bloop, 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 bloop.
Yep, exactly. And it goes 360, again, 3D space, not just two directions.
Right. Awesome. All right, cool. DP Debunk says, I have only one question, and it's the most important one. And I need an honest scientific answer. Who is your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Ooh, it's got to be Michelangelo because I was a surfer growing up in Southern California.
Mine is Michelangelo because my name is Michael. That's literally, when I was a kid, my mom was like, yo, it's Michelangelo. He has the same name as you. And I was like, yo, cool. That's so cool. Michelangelo's my favorite. And then there you go.
Did you ask mom for a big stick for Christmas?
No, I didn't. I did not ask for it, but I did take karate lessons because of the Ninja Turtles, but that didn't last long because I couldn't do it. It was hard. I couldn't do all the moves. I remember my second class. I was trying to like keep up with the rest of the class and I couldn't. And I cried, and then I don't think I ever really went back.
It's okay to cry. It really is okay to cry. All those who say otherwise, it's okay to cry.
Well, I was also like 7 years old.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, come on, man up.
Oh yeah,
big boy bands.
My mom was in chat right now. She said, "I wonder how much."
Hi, Mom.
I wonder how much of this my grandfather knew. He did the radars in Iceland when the Cold War started.
So interesting enough, radar basically uses the same spectrums as radio. This applies to radar. And the funny thing is when you're in the Navy, you take a shit ton of training. Besides the training for your job, we have what we call, because I was in an electronics job, specifically as cryptology, we have what we call NEATS modules, which stands for Navy Electricity and Electronics Training. And one of their things is their modules. It's like 22 different modules or some shit. One of their modules is radar principles. So it teaches you the basics of radar. You want to know what they teach you first and foremost?
What?
And figure 110 or 17, where the moniker flying under the radar comes from. Because you're under the curvature of the earth, because you're lower in altitude, so therefore the curvature of the earth hides you.
Oh.
That's where flying under the radar comes from, because the closer you are to the ground as you're flying, you're not picked up by radar.
Oh, because you're you're being obstructed.
Right. And there's other variables like backscatter and all this other shit that
Yeah,
goes into it.
it's
It's
not
a
that easy.
presentation like this. It's a presentation like this that we could do about radar.
Yeah.
But coincidentally, the person who helped me with this, actually, the presentation I ran it by with originally on the Globe Gangsters Discord, and if they were going to be in the chat today, so if you guys are, hey guys, how you guys doing? They is Alan Evans. He was actually an RAF radar engineer who basically worked basically at a station on the coast, looking outwards over the North Sea the entire time. So we had multiple discussions about radar and radio and the different variables that we had to account for and stuff like that. Because look, you can't know everything. You got to go out and find the subject matter experts to help you out. Pure and
Right.
simple. No different than bringing Scuba Drews on and say, let's talk about sailing.
Yeah, exactly.
I've done sailing. I've even done the land sailing that he was talking about as a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't do the performance things, but I can tell you about displacement holes and how the Catharsis 2 doesn't, disproves the whole ice ring because of what they did and how they did it and stuff like that. And the math behind the hull speed because it's displacement and the length of the boat and all this other stuff. But again, I stay in my lane. I stay with what stuff I know. I let everyone else, subject matters, they can take over. I'm like not a big physics guy. I'm definitely not an astrophysics guy. I'm not going to talk to you about orbital mechanics or, relativity or shit like that. I mean, that's way over my head.
Yeah.
But I know people who do, and I'm happy to turn it over to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I love about my show is that all you guys are reaching out to me to be on my show to tell me to explain your expertise and I find that so freaking cool because like I love learning. I will never be an expert in anything that you guys do, but yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. So
You can actually apply this to Wi-Fi in your own company at the same time. The same principles sort of apply when you talk about obstruction and diffraction across it and stuff like that, and how secondary rays go.
Yeah, we actually do have we have a software that we use. It's through Cisco that it actually if you put in like where the walls are and what they're made of and all that kind of stuff, it'll actually show you what the signal strength will look like in like blue clouds. It's really
Isn't that
freaking
such
cool.
a cool tool? Isn't that a cool toy? Now apply that to a globe model, and you can figure out the same thing. And I'll show you some of these things that we have, at the end of this, just to kind of see what the output is, so people can kind of look at it.
Yeah, perfect. All right, cool.
So the last claim I'm going to address is the accuracy, because they talk about pinpoint accuracy. It's only 400 to 500 yards wide. The place was smoked. Blah, 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 fucking blah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Let's talk real quick about Derby. So we already talked about Derby being the sole. When I mean sole, it was the singular plant that created the Merlin V12 engine, which was required for the Spitfires and the Hurricanes, and coincidentally also used in the P-51 Mustangs later in the war.
Okay.
You get rid of that plant and you shoot down a bunch of planes, there is not a place to make the engines to make more planes. Right. You have basically a bunch of hulls sitting, airframes sitting around with no go. It's basically, Fred and Barney pedaling down the runway at that point. But besides that, we also have the locomotive and coach works, which not only made most of the locomotives, both diesel and steam, for all of the UK, but they also made the cars that were used to bring tanks to different parts of the country, to the coast, to be part of the D-Day invasion or whatnot. So this is a huge hub. It was also a huge hub for the people leaving London that was getting bombed as shit every night to get out of, when they talk about the kids, leaving their parents and going to some, aunt's house or some good Samaritan, they're going through places like Derby. So there's huge ideas of these places of valuable targets. So again, their claim is pinpoint accuracy. It was smoked, for saying another word. It was a year-long bombing campaign that Derby was subjected to. But was it? So since we're talking about geometry and trigonometry and things like this, here's the coordinates of the actual Rolls-Royce Limited building, which is actually still standing.
Wow.
It's called Merlin. It's called Marble Hall. It's at an elevation of 53. It also had, multiple, the rail yard was not far from it, maybe about a mile from it. And it encompassed like a couple hundred acres, rather large target, Jesus. Anybody should be able to hit this, right?
Yeah.
So So we have two high value targets in Derby. Now, Derby is really Knickerbein's moonshot. This is like maybe, but the Flurfs thing it is and no is subject to a year long bombing campaign, and it had to always be available. Yeah, we'll address that in a second. Now, because of the importance of this, all right. Now, when we remember we talked about intersecting beams being over a target area, so this would be the target area here.
Yep.
Now, according to the Luftwaffe documents, the beams are not 400 to 500 yards wide. They're actually 2.8 kilometers and 3.7 kilometers wide for a square target area of 10 kilometers square.
Wow.
10 square kilometers of target.
That's pretty large.
Well, it gets better. That's based on an absolute perpendicular intersection. But because it's not perpendicular and it's actually at an acute angle, it's actually a rhombus, which actually creates a larger and more oddly shaped target area.
Right.
So how can you target a single building in 10,000 square meters, a single building, regardless of how big the plant is? Kind of difficult, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would say.
So this is where things start going sideways. And so besides from their measurements, let's talk about specifically accuracy. Now, if only someone had done the research, like some entity that had consolidated all the reported bombings and the number of casualties occurred during the Battle of Britain. I don't know, maybe like the UK National Archives located in Kew. So at the top here is a snapshot from a spreadsheet. Okay. This spreadsheet contains 32,869 reported bombings by the Luftwaffe over all of Britain between 1939 and 1942. Actually goes a little bit, it kind of goes past 42, but 1942 is important for Derby. Now, if you notice, stop at the spreadsheet, if you worked with anything with Excel, you'll notice that there's only really two filters applied. And I'm happy to show the spreadsheet to anybody, all 32,000 rows.
Jesus.
That there's a civil defense region. Derby is in what they call the North Midlands. And then I filtered by that to cut down where I was looking from. And then two, I cut down to which ones were Derby. There were a total of 6 night bombings of Derby.
Wow.
For that year. Not a year-long campaign, 6 bombings. And of those 6 bombings, only 2 of them resulted in any number of casualties. The only significant damage, and significant I use in quotes because it's marginally, was a daytime bombing by a Ju-88 German bomber, daytime, so it wasn't using Knickebein.
Right.
It dropped 4 bombs on this building. So here's the front of the building, here's the side of the building. Kind of narrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even if it extended out and they had an additional plant out here, and let's say it's 3 times as wide. We're talking about if it was only 600 meters by 800 meters of our target area based on the RAF measurements, you have bombers in formation. I think anybody and their mother, a blind man just listening, listening to an audible tone. So a blind man can tell him, hey, drop. And they would have hit that.
Yeah.
If you have 12 planes in the air and everyone's dropping at the same time, someone's going to hit that.
Statistically.
Right. It took a daytime bomber dropping 4 bombs. Only 1 hit the actual building.
Wow.
The other 3 hit the neighborhood around it.
Wow.
Now, this attack is actually memorialized by Derby as the most lethal air attack during World War II in Derby. Think about that for a minute. We have a rail yard of several hundred acres. We have the sole manufacturing plant for the V12 engine, for the Merlin V12 engine. It was attacked 6 times. The only time they did any damage to it was on the 7th time. And of those 4 bombs, 1 hit. Not to mention, it turned around and did strafing runs with this machine gun because it realized it didn't do much damage.
Right.
And this is memorialized by Britain and by Derby with a plaque that you can go visit at this site. Cool. And they actually do like, annual services about the people who were killed.
Wow, that's cool. So do they still? Is that still an operational building? Just a side?
No,
No.
no, no,
Okay.
no, no.
It's just a memorial building.
No, if you look it up on Google Maps, it's actually called the former Rolls-Royce building, Marble Hall. It's
Gotcha.
now a historical monument for anything else. I don't know if there's anything actually there.
Yeah.
Most of the things I look at doesn't look like it is, but it's definitely obviously a very much of a symbolism for World War II itself.
Yeah. So really quick, I have Marcus
Mm-hmm.
Leach that says is pronounced Darby.
I'm sorry, I'm not British. Look, I'm not from England. I lived in New England, so we say things like "pak de ka," and we don't use R's, but we definitely don't use Derby.
You're in New England?
No, I moved from Southern California after I left the Navy. I moved to I moved to Boston to Somerville, and I lived there about
Oh, that's
10
right.
years.
Yeah,
before I moved to New York.
Yeah,
now
that's
I'm behind
right.
enemy lines in New York, not
Yeah.
far from the city.
Mm.
Oh shit! I should have opened up with the CC. Good morning, good afternoon, and not Westchester County. Although Westchester County is literally across the bridge from me, but that's a different
Really?
story.
Well, I'm actually driving right through that neighborhood on Saturday morning. So
I wish I can get a chance to see you this weekend. Unfortunately, I have my kid, and there's supposed to be some shitty weather. So
yeah, it's going to be garbage
Yeah.
weather. I'm glad we're leaving at 5 a.m. Let me tell you that.
I might be able to come down on Saturday for a few hours, but it seems like it's like an hour and a half trip for to hang out for an hour or two before I get back and let
Yeah,
the dog out.
exactly.
But basically the question is that if this had the amount of accuracy that the Flurf said it did,
Mhm.
right?
Pinpoint.
It would be an easy target. This thing should have been rubble. But yet there's been no reported damage to this building outside that day bombing, and there's been no reported damage to the Derby rail yards outside of ever.
Right.
And we're talking about several hundred acres. Okay. So
Here we go.
here we go. So the advantage of doing your own research is looking for source documents. And again, like I said, that website that I used of that Dutch person who was a big fanboy of the S-27 receiver and did all this research, he literally found all this shit in microfiche at the German military archives. So it is on microfiche that you can actually get scans of and everything else. And I have the PDF versions of it. Let's go over some of these now. What do you think?
Let's do it.
So, but here's one thing I kind of want to mention is that there are a shit ton of requirements that have to be met, whether it's the system requirements. Okay, you think of it this way. Think of this as an RFP in the network, right? And it's a request for proposal, right?
Oh, I lost
Sorry.
you.
All right, I'm back.
All right, yeah,
Am I
you're back. Yeah, I heard everything that you just said, but then you just
hold on.
out.
I got to connect my camera back here.
Yeah, no
Hold on.
problem. Take your time. Really quick, I am just gonna take a quick bathroom break.
Yep.
I'll be right back.
I'll do the same.
All right, cool. All right, I'll be right back, guys. All right. Well, that was
All
quick.
right, I'm back.
All righty.
Cool.
So really quick, I am really enjoying this this presentation. I feel like you're making this really easy to understand
Good. I hope that.
for someone who has absolutely no idea what any of this stuff is. So so really quick, so you're gonna be so is this going to be a thing where like an actual channel that you're gonna
Yes.
Okay.
So the reason why I kind of got into flat Earth and everything else to begin with, and we can talk about this briefly, is that I have at the time I had a 13-year-old daughter who was on social media, TikTok, and all this other shit, right?
Mhm.
Who was prone to all these misinformation, and I have a very I may be biased. I have a very brilliant daughter. She reads way above her grade. She's great at math. She's great at science. In fact, she's my science partner. We've done the Cavendish experiment in our garage.
Oh,
She
come
mountain
on. That's
bikes, dude.
sick.
She mountain bikes with me. She actually goes up and we did. We were working on. We had to stop because it was getting too cold. But we were working on the cold moonlight bullshit
Yeah.
thing. We were working on that. We actually took MC Tunes because I was talking to MC Tune on X, and he provided me his challenge procedure. So I took that and we started working on a few of them, but it was getting too cold. It was getting too late, and it was just like, all right, this is kind of getting. This is a little bit too much for right now. Maybe we'll pick it up again in the spring or summer where it's a little warmer.
Yeah.
Look, I'm from Southern California. If it's cold, like I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt right now, but my heat's set at 72. So I am not a New Englander at heart. I snowboard, and after every run, I go sit in for a half hour inside the lodge by the fireplace because I'm a wuss.
Yeah. Drinking hot chocolate.
Exactly. So the funny thing is like since she was prone to all this misinformation, I'm like, you know what, I should really do something about this, and I've been kicking around the idea over and over again. And actually, it wasn't until I saw our community member DP Debunk start hammering out videos
Yes.
from out of nowhere, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, the guy's funny.
Yep.
I like the guy. He's hilarious, and I like his videos. And to be honest, his video on Steve right now, the one you guys talked about last night, I watched that today. I didn't get a chance to watch it until today. I had the same reaction that he did, like reading that message from his son.
Yeah.
To where, I mean, I'm a parent, I'm a father, so for me it was like, holy shit! If my daughter didn't talk to me or gave this to me, I mean, I'd be heartbroken. I'd be like beside myself.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, it's kind of like I decided to kind of kick it off. So I've been brainstorming because you can't just start a channel and just have one video. It's just kind of pointless. So I'm going to be making videos about Battle of the Beams. I'm going to be doing videos about Ace High Network, not only the history of it and the storytelling part of it, but also the debunking part of it. There'll be two separate videos. So if you want to know the history of the Ace High Network and how it was used in the Cold War and the advantages of it and what it actually produced for the Allies, it'll be one video for that. And if you want to talk about the flat Earth model or non-model and how it doesn't work on a flat Earth, then we'll have that too.
Awesome.
And also some shorts, because one of the things that I've been hugely entertained by is like how the conspiratorial mind works. So like my first unfornicated thing was a space on X with a former conspiracy theorist who thought that 9/11 didn't happen, there was no planes, and Sandy Hook was a government op.
Yeah.
Now I'm a parent. Sandy Hook is less than an hour away from me.
Yep.
They were actually our customer.
Wow.
I'd been to that school. So yeah, it hits a little hard for me. So so interviewing her was actually great because I thought I would actually have problems like interviewing her and talking about these subjects. But it comes out that she was really cool, really thing. And that was kind of like my first unfornicated thing, was talking about the conspiratorial mindset and where it comes from. And how it got there and things like that. And we discussed, different traumas that she had in her life and what kind of got her to that point.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what got me in this thing where I started debunking stuff on X, and then started in Discord, and that's kind of like my own stomping grounds. I don't go into Facebook. I don't go into, you won't find me in Oakley's or Flatzoid's, server unless somebody wants to tag me in the server. I don't have invites to the server. So if someone wants to send me an invite, I'll be happy to join.
Join mine. Oh, you're in mine, right?
Yeah, I'm in yours.
Yeah.
But like I'm in yours, I'm in Glowbusters, I'm in a few other ones, and I've talked to the individual flirts for that. But the advantage of it is that I don't necessarily have the, I don't have the reach because, to be honest, I have other things I'd rather do with my time. So, but to protect, not only I wasn't really worried about my daughter, I was worried about her friends and people she knew and stuff like that falling in it. And I found out that a family friend that I grew up with, our mothers were best of friends, so we were friends as kids. He's a flat earther. And he's basically alienated his whole family and things like that. And that's what kind of got me into it to begin with. And then once I heard that, I was like, this is ridiculous. And then like everybody else, I'm like, all right, I need to start making an effort of making sure people don't fall in this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to do that? Start taking the shit apart. What can I speak to? I can speak to things like this.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And this is definitely a very specific niche that, it just doesn't work unless the ground is the shape that we know it to be.
Don't get me started on undersea cables and satellites. We can have a whole other conversation on that if you want.
Well, actually, just a really quick correction.
Mm-hmm.
When I did my TikTok TFE debunks video, one of the videos it said the percentage of like basically hardwired undersea data transfer is done 100% with underwater cables, and that's not wrong, because
it's like 98. It's like 98%, 95%. But yeah.
Well, the thing is that the narrator specifically said it kept out from his description of what he was talking about any possibility of having anything other than undersea cable. So of course it's going to be 100%, because you're literally saying 100% of data goes through these cables because it all goes through these cables. But he didn't talk about whatever. It was
right. Well, and when you talk about like the Deep Space Network, which is like Australia and Spain and stuff like that, we get our NASA connects to them via undersea cables to be able to talk to Voyager 1, Voyager 2. And that number is now obviously changed with Starlink and things like that too. So, I mean, there's, this is,
exactly.
But I mean, if you want to talk about satellites, the different types of satellites, their bandwidth, and undersea cables and their bandwidth and the cost per, I mean, I can talk about that for days also. So, I mean, that's so another conversation if you want to have.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have you back on, but really quick, I have a cousin who brilliant mind. He worked for LIGO back in 2016, 2017.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So he actually wrote the paper. He co-wrote the paper amongst other scientists about the gravitational waves they detected from the two black holes colliding. Super freaking cool, right? But then on the other side, I have another family member that is really close. Well, I mean, as close related as he's my uncle, who is a flat earther. I didn't know this until I was going through flat Earth Facebook groups, and I start seeing him posting. I'm like, no way, this can't be my uncle. And come to find out, it is. And he's one of those people who got like a Winnebago and is living off the grid on like the deserts of Nevada, right? And like it's so crazy. Like I was like, wait, your nephew worked at LIGO. like what? How is this a thing? But it's just that mentality. But whatever. Aside from that,
and it's funny when we see these things, right, that they come up and we start talking about it, because it's odd that like you think that, all right, this is ridiculous, there's no way that this would happen to our family and everything else. But like, I have a QAnon in my family. I got conspiracy theorists in my family. I didn't know they were there. I'm like, you guys are literally like uncles and stuff that I know. It's like, you guys are literally one step from being a flat earther.
Yeah, exactly. My old boss, my old boss was the same way. He would come into work. He'd be like, "Look at how beautiful and clear the blue sky is today. I guarantee I see one chemtrail, and tomorrow is going to start raining." Right? And then and obviously it wouldn't happen, and like I'd call him out on it the next day, be like, "Oh, is it raining? No, it's not. Oh, okay. I guess it's not a chemtrail then." Marcus Leach leaked. Oh my God, Marcus Leach. For $5 Canadian, we got some connects in the chat. Bob the Science Guy and I are low key working on a radio astronomy based experiment showing Earth rotation and Earth orbit. I run a radio observatory.
Dude, that's cool.
Oh my God, that's so sick.
I need to make a visit.
Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is radio astronomy started with like literally radio operators making their own antennas in the 1930s and 40s and realizing that they're receiving stuff that they don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah. That's and what I also learned was that amateur astronomers back in the day, I mean like ancient times, a lot of what we know today is because of those amateur astronomers. Like it's so mind-blowing that like these people who have nothing to do with any of these major space agencies are figuring this stuff out on their own. And
and one step from that is, I don't know if you're aware or not, but during the Apollo 11 mission, remember the phone call from Nixon to the astronauts that, obviously can never happen. Okay.
Right.
How many times, how long have people been calling in to radio stations to where their voice comes across the air? I hate to break it to you, it's been since like the late 40s, early 50s.
Really?
Same pretense, right? I mean, forget cell phones nowadays and everything else. Anybody who called into a radio station that their voice went across the air is the same technology that they used to talk to Nixon to talk to the astronauts. Now, interesting thing enough, there was a radio operator in Louisville, Kentucky, who built his own antenna. He actually restored an older receiver and everything else. He had a reporter out. Now, the guy's name, the radio operator's name is Basinger. The reporter's name is Glenn. Glenn was there to do a story, young kid, to do a story about about listening in. It's called lunar eavesdropping and everything else. Now, he wrote a story about what they listened to. It was about 10 seconds before it was showing up on the TV. He was able to listen in even to the UHF frequencies between the individual astronauts. Not affiliated with NASA, in the middle of Louisville, Kentucky, nowhere near Houston, nowhere near Hollywood, or God knows where the fuck else they want to say it happened. And that reporter is on X, and I've talked to him multiple times about it.
Wow. That's so cool.
So, and that's not, and he actually, they were trying to record it. They ran out of tape because he didn't replace the tape before he started recording. And he actually, he recorded like 35 minutes of it, and that included part of the Nixon phone call. You want to talk about independent information?
That's so sick. Wow, that is so freaking cool.
Yeah. Sorry, a little side tangent there. I thought you were kick out of.
Yeah, absolutely. I find all this stuff absolutely amazing or interesting. Douglas Jenkins says, are you sure it wasn't Lego? Yeah, you know what? It could have been
it was
Lego.
Legos.
Yeah, it was Boston Concert says, my current boss is a conspiracy theorist and a flurf. It's insane how much he knows that no one else does.
Amazing that none of them have a Nobel Prize yet.
Yeah, when I asked fucking, did you see that when I asked freaking Psalm where his Nobel Prize was? Because okay, anyway, William Foley for $5, thank you, says most new comet detections are done by amateur astronomers. Yeah.
Yep. And the funny thing is a lot of radio operators are basically the backbone of like national disasters. They're the ones who are trying to get information out and stuff like that when there's issues like we talk about like North Carolina, how it was hit and hammered, right? With the hurricane. Radio amateurs are stuck up. In fact, there's a veterans group called Team Rubicon who actually goes in and does cleanup and stuff like that and tries to, supply food, water, and things like that. It's a veterans group that is specifically started for things like national disasters, but they also include different things like communication, so we can get news out and information out and everything else.
Very cool. That is so cool. And like all these people, all these flat earthers have to do is just pick up a manual, pick up a book, and do it themselves. I
have offered any flat earther, they don't have to dock themselves. They just have to tell me the state they're in. I will give them a list of amateur radio clubs that they can contact and talk about an Earth, Moon, Earth bounce to verify that A, there's no dome, and B, what the distance is to the moon. I've offered to do that for any flurf you want to know. Just tell me what state or what country you're in, and I will give you a listing of radio, and I'll even do an introduction for you.
Perfect.
One person has taken me up on that, and he was a Glober.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that's no fun. All right. So Monkey Cat Pat Pat. So this is how you super chat. You ready? So if you grab your phone and you go down here to the little money icon, you click on that, and then you hit super chat. Oh, you hit super chat. Okay. And then what you do is you see this slider right here. You slide it
all the way to the right.
All the way to the right. Okay. You hit all the way to the right, and then you can type whatever you want in there, and then you hit purchase. Okay. So that's how you super chat. But thank you so much for that $2 super chat, Monkey Cat Pat, asking how to send a super chat. So make sure the slider is all the way to the right. All right. And then don't tell your wife that you did that, though.
And if he wants my OnlyFans or direct Venmo, let me know, and I'll be happy to provide it.
Perfect. Oh, I love it. I love it.
All right, so the last part of this, we're
Yes.
just going to go over the source documents real quick, and then we can sit around and BS, and we can talk about the effects of Route 3 on our sanity for
Oh
traffic.
my
So I used to
God,
live in the
dude.
area. We can also talk about the Big Dig and what a shit show that was
I
going through
I
downtown
luck-
Boston.
I luckily never had to go through downtown Boston. That was when I was a child.
Oh.
I remember. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But you
I'm
might.
older than you.
Yeah. Why don't you share your screen again? Because
Yep.
that's I don't see anything. While you do that, Marcus Leach says our dish will add Earth Moon Earth capability in the next few months. Progress is slow though, dude. Marcus, if there's anything that I could do to help you out with that, that would be awesome. DPD.
Dude,
Oh, sorry.
You
Go
need a
ahead.
volunteer. I will fly out and take some. I have time to kill. I have like
let's
a
go.
month of time off to kill. Like you want to do the total station at Lake George?
Yes.
I'm 90 minutes away. Let's go. If you want to talk about flying out to, I don't know where he is and Bob the Science Guy is, hell, I'll get on a plane. I have an aunt who's a nun in Rochester, Minnesota, Wisconsin, one of the two things, wherever the Mayo Clinic is. Look, I have places to stay, or even not. I'm happy to come on out and help out.
Perfect. I have Mark W for €2 says message unclear. Just ordered pizza. You better be delivered here. You better have delivered
I
that.
can give my address for Uber if you want, and some prime New York pizza places.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, oh my God, the pizza in New York, dude. It's like pizza in Boston is good, like Sal's pizza and all that, but like pizza in New York is in Connecticut so fucking good.
Okay, when you talk about Boston, though, it's like I'd rather go down the Purple Shamrock or the Black Rose and get some fish and chips. Down around Long Wharf and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I used to purposely create problems in a network to go from the office in Cambridge
Yep.
to be in downtown Crossing during the summertime at like around 1 o'clock, and then take the rest of the day at the Black Rose.
Perfect. I actually had at my last job, I had a client that was on the wharf, and it was a really cool area. DP Debunk says when I hit that button, my phone just makes a fat noise, and I get the middle finger emote.
Is that from the bank? Is that from the banking app, or is that from the YouTube app?
There's a small airport close to the observatory, says Marcus Leach.
Okay, I don't have my pilot's license yet, unfortunately, so I got to fly commercial.
I know someone who does. And then Boston Caution says New York pizza is gross. South Shore Bar Pizza is where it's at. No, New York pizza has its.
If you want cannolis, you go to the North End. Pure and simple.
Yes, Mike. Are you a Mike's or are you a what's across the street? I forget. But
no, I'm the across the street guy because I used to go to the Rack all the time to go hang out on Friday and Saturday nights.
Gotcha. I'm a Mike's Pastries kind of guy.
Mike's closed when the sun went down. The other place stays open till like 1 o'clock in the morning, so you can do like a drunk runs for a 6-pack of cannoli and take it home with you on the T.
You know what I love about Mike's Pastries is they actually have a stand. If you take the train from where I live and just go right into the first stop in Boston, which is where the Bruins play. There's a Mike's Pastry stand there, and they have like a small selection of dude, if I could count how many tiramisu I've had from there, it's disgusting.
It's like finding out your local mall has a Cinnabon.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love it. Mike's all day. Let's go, Boston. You know. All right.
Yeah, I spent 10 years in Boston, and then hanging around, like I said, North End, Kendall Square, downtown Crossing, Chestnut Hill, going to Red Sox games, sitting on the roof. Because that's where we had season tickets for the company, was on the roof on the first base side, sitting out of the Green Monster. Fun times.
Oh, no big deal. But I met Remy.
You suck.
Yeah, I was at his restaurant after the April 20th game, the Boston Strong game, where Ortiz said this is our fucking city. I was 3 rows behind Bruce Springsteen, and I didn't even know that, and then he stood up and started singing Sweet Caroline. Holy shit, what a show that was. Then after that we went to Remy's, and Remy and his family were fucking sitting there eating their dinner. And you know what? I gave no fucks. I went up to him and I said, "Can I please get a picture with you?" And he was pissed.
I never, you do that. You don't go down Lansdowne Street and just do like a bar crawl.
Yeah.
we never made it past Kaskenflagen because we would just start doing shots, and the idea of walking just seemed like way too far. It's like it's bad enough it's bad enough we got to cross the bridge to go to the IHOP to get down to the T for to get on the green line and pack in like sardines like everybody else.
Oh my god, the green line and the orange line are I hated those because they were.
I lived off the orange line.
Yeah,
so I know.
Yeah, they just seem so unsafe. And then Alewife, you see Alewife recently is getting all these derails, and it's like, Jesus Christ, I've dodged bullets.
Oh Jesus.
Anywho, all right. So let's go. Let's get back to your presentation. I'm having too much fun here.
All right. So the next few slides, basically, I'm going to review some of the Luftwaffe source documents that we have. Again, these are held at the Federal Military Archives. It's located in Freiburg, Germany. They're on microfiche. You can either pay to have someone scan them in for you. Sometimes you can find some of the scans. I'll be openly honest with you. I haven't tried to do that because I found a source that already did. So I'm like, well, hell, fuck it. If you give me the actual link, I mean, I might as well use that and not have to pay for it myself, to be perfectly honest with you.
There you go.
But
why don't you share your screen before Fricazzoid's like, oh, he's not showing his
I did. Hold on. Why isn't it do? All right, let me bring this up. Share. Oh, you know what? I forgot to click. Actually, like, go ahead and share.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the problem. There we go.
All right, I see it.
That?
I see it's perfect.
Okay, I'm sorry, Fricazzoid. I hope this makes you feel better.
Perfect.
So, one of the interesting things that we deal with is like when we talk about like RFPs and stuff like that, is just like system requirements and things like that. There's like a whole list of engineering that goes in the background. We already talked about some of the engineering that goes into this. So before you even go build on a site, it's like you have to engineer this. You have to like, have a model and make sure it works, at least theoretically, before you go put it in practice. Because like I said, this antenna is almost the size of a football field on its side.
Right.
It's on like a concrete track and everything else. So you can't just put it up and like, whoops, we were wrong. It doesn't work that way. So when we talk about these things is like, there's actually these memos from the Luftwaffe that are on file, and they're like from the 1940, 1939, stuff like that specifically have to do with Knickerbein. And it goes over the system requirements, goes over site requirements, even goes over things of the antenna. And actually, the site that I got these from, he actually has the actual building schematics of the antenna itself and why it's different and things like that. So, but to be honest, like these are all requirements that were done by the Luftwaffe Signal Corps. Now, why the Signal Corps? Well, they were responsible for Knickerbein. So the Signal Corps is like SIGINT. So whether it's being used or being exploited, it's like, two rooms in the same house kind of mentality. But, if you're using your critically thinking skills, you might ask, why are there requirements? We should just be able to put this up, shoot it, and it should work just fine because it's flat Earth. It'll just work, just to quote out. What does it matter what the requirements are? Well, to understand the amount of engineering and everything else that kind of goes into this and the amount of research that went into this, it gets convoluted very quickly. So here are the Luftwaffe requirements for the overall system, just so we understand it. They're talking about a beam width for the overlap of the echo signal of 0.2 degrees, later to be improved to 0.1 degrees. Due to the size of the antenna and due to the mechanism that they did to create the thing, it was basically mechanical pulleys that kind of took the V and either angled it flatter or more angled to depending on where their target area was. Mm-hmm. All Luftwaffe documents basically say 0.3. Even if you give them 0.2, it's still not a half square kilometer of a target area. It's like, maybe 8 kilometers instead of 10. So
yeah, that's such a tiny amount too.
Yeah.
Like that it makes such a huge difference. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So it talks about dots and dashes. Also talks about how wide the actual beams are, not just the overlap, but actually the beams themselves were plus or minus 12 degrees. And that the reception for the dots and dashes, because again, it's an analog signal. So think about when you're driving your car and the radio station that you're loving here, and you're doing some karaoke and you're driving in traffic, and all of a sudden you get far enough to where you're like, oh shit, I'm hearing a bunch of static. I can't quite hear everything. Mm-hmm. This is what we're dealing with. Now, again, these are translated from a Luftwaffe memo. And we talk about ground station monitoring receivers. We talk about all sorts of different things, and that it has to be compatible with the existing Funklanda FUBL1 receiver, which was standard equipment on all the Luftwaffe. Basically, the reason why that matters is because it doesn't, there's no unnecessary delays to make specialized equipment. They're already using equipment that is already there. So now we're talking about site requirements. Now, site requirements, a lot of these things are actually talking about specifically about things like topography, talking about clear line of sight to the horizon, if at all possible, and beyond it. We're talking about different things that might be come into question of why we need specific sites. Now, why is this necessary? Well, that defines why they chose Cleve and Stolberg Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's salt water, because there's conductivity, because it's 10 times more conductive than even the best land. It could put it anywhere, but if it shoots over land, it's going to lose its conductivity and lose its signal fade, or have more signal fade as it goes out, and won't be nearly as be received at such a long distance. These things all go into the engineering of the system as a whole. And if you change one variable, it could change all the variables. So anytime you change one, you have to change all of them and retest them to make sure that nothing else has changed.
Really quick question. Is the land elevation as well taken into account? Like not into account, but like as a benefit of this is where I want to build this.
So if you're like the transmitting station, because it was on a hill outside of Cleve, and it's still there, and actually the cement ring is actually still there in Cleve. You can actually still see it, and there are some anchor points that you can still see. So the reason why they chose Cleve is because it was a hilltop. So obviously, if you start with an elevation of your transmitter, you can already get a further horizon to start with, right? And because the planes are traveling at, say, 6,000 meters, the receiving altitude obviously, or elevation obviously matters as well. So those are two really big variables. So it's not like you're just saying, oh, I'm going to put this in a valley and shoot right between these mountains and see what happens. It's not. No, they would prefer to be on top of the mountain first, because again, the horizon does not rise to eye level. Right. And you can see further from a higher altitude. So the idea is extend that altitude, extend that radio horizon as far as you can, and still aim at a shallow angle or even at a negative angle to make sure that you're getting that ground wave propagation to go around the curvature, knowing that it's going to reach further.
Cool.
So, I mean, again, I don't want to read some of the slides, but here's actually one of the like one of the documents here, like, the header and stuff like that. So this is actually the document itself, which is translated as the planning and construction of the VHF radio beacons for radio navigation. This was dated 10 September 1939. There's some of the details on it. And the antenna itself. So, this thing is not small.
Jesus.
So this thing it could go, almost flat, 180 degrees max. And that's like the very limit of flat, right? Or it could go upwards up to 161 degrees. And it's, again, mechanical pulleys that actually change the angle between both. So each one of these is a side lobe. So let's say this is the dashes and this is the dots.
Cool.
Right.
Okay.
So now what they do is if it's flat, they can go further because it keeps that 0.3 degrees as much as possible, but if it's close by, they don't necessarily need that. Hey, we can go ahead and close that a little bit and make it even small, for all those other pretenses and stuff. So the other thing of it is, if you look at this, you see how there's two rows here?
Yeah.
So one of these rows, right, is these are what we call dipole antennas. So they're basically there's two rows. There's 8 elements across, and there's 2 rows top to bottom. An exact same thing is built behind that. And the reason why it's behind that is because it allows directivity of the antenna itself. Now, there's a thing that the Luftwaffe confirms to is called energy bundling. And basically what it is, it's a measurement of the signal in the forward direction of the main lobe versus the side lobes. Remember that drawing? Remember that rainbow drawing? It had a couple spikes going off the sides and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's what we call side lobes. So because they had this antenna that was literally doubled up on itself, it created a 1:64 ratio of the main lobe. It literally put 64 times more power in the forward direction than it did in the back or the side lobes.
Wow.
Again, engineering of the antenna itself. And besides the fact, it was big as fuck. I mean, we're talking about literally, it is almost the size of a football field on its side.
Right.
I mean, like, think of that for a minute. I mean, it's huge. Could you do that nowadays? Hell no.
Yeah.
FCC and everybody else would throw you under a bus. Like we were talking about, hey, maybe we can recreate this. I'm like, good luck.
Yeah,
If
right.
we told the FCC we were making something like this, they would like arrest us before we even started. The other thing is they also have navigation documents talk about how to navigate using the device, part of the training program and things like that. Again, all on microfiche. And the interesting thing that I kind of want to point out about some of these things is that this bottom document specifically,
Okay.
right? It talks about how the flight altitude given contains average values. Now, these average values are based on specific measurements that are made. And we're going to go over and I actually have the measurements that were done by the Luftwaffe itself,
Okay.
including who did the measurements. And we're going to go over those in a minute. But here's the thing. It shows that the flight altitudes to be maintained at various distances is attached. If the world is flat, why does it matter what altitude you're at a certain distance to be able to listen to the signal?
Right. It wouldn't matter. No,
That's
no.
almost like that lower level. And remember that lower level of that map that went up?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like that would, if you flip it over, it almost looks like curvature.
Imagine that.
Oh, look what I found.
Whoa,
A
there it
graph.
is. Holy crap.
So let's talk about the graph for a little bit, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone remember this graph? We talked about it briefly. Here's a transmitter station down here. We were talking about, hey, look how far it can go out and why is it extending past the optical horizon? There's no line here that cuts it off, all that fun stuff. Okay. Now let's talk about this as a whole. So now keep in mind, this is an analog signal. So like your car and your radio, it doesn't just, if you're outside this lower limit, it just doesn't just shut off. If you're outside this limit, it just means there's more static.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just like as you're driving, and all of a sudden the radio station starts fading out. And as you drive further, it fades out more. And then it might come back in, it might come back out, and everything else. Now, these values are based on an average of receiver values from their testing. And we're going to come to those actually in the next slide. But I want everyone to understand this is the average values. Now, because of this lower audibility limit, in the military, we have these things of there's conservative estimates, and then there's like, look, I need 100%, and no matter what fucking happens, I need to be able to maintain 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we're talking about wartime and things like that. So the idea is that, hey, it might work out here, but I'm not saying it was going to work out here. You need to pull that shit back in and pull it in here to make sure that it works. There's no question. It can't be like some random geomagnetic storm is screwing everything up and now we can't use it. I want to make sure that these values are as close to 100% as possible. So these are average values. Now, if we look at Spalding was around 440 meters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, hold on. Maybe we can actually mark exactly where the Spalding actually intercept was. Oh look, here we got here.
Oh.
So it was around about 430 kilometers. It was about at 5,600 meters.
Mm-hmm.
That's right about here, right? Let's just call it here. It's a little outside that lower audibility limit, but all that means is that it is in a sea of static. Now, when we take into consideration the ad hoc design of the receiver and the airplane, let me just tell you, it's a fucking miracle that they were able to hear that to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've run up against issues where, you had to get creative and stuff like that. And, like, I'm sure this guy had his eyes closed. He was concentrating. He was probably climbing underneath the desk anywhere he can to get away from the noise to see if he could hear it at any point. But if it's outside this average audibility, like, can we really, besides the fact that we couldn't take those as measurements, because of the single use, because of the equipment and stuff like that. Well, now they're outside the what the Luftwaffe considered the audible limit in the usable region. Should we really consider these as actual measurements then, if it's not even within the region that they are guaranteed is supposed to work? No, it's going to affect how those are received. And you remember that, and here's how we have the proof of that. Remember those 400 to 500 yard wide?
Mm-hmm.
Well, according to this document, this thing should have been roughly 1.5 kilometers from center. So 1.5 kilometers here, roughly, 1.5 kilometers here, roughly.
Okay.
That's a 3 kilometer wide signal, not 400 yards. The fact they heard anything is a miracle. The fact they got an observation of any sort of number is a miracle. But that number, just from this graph alone, forget the equipment and everything else. Let's just say, Dano's full of shit. The hell with the equipment. He's making it up. Great. This is outside the usable region. The fact that you would consider this an accurate measurement when it's not even in this region,
Right.
come on.
Yeah. Oh,
So
huh.
let's talk about actual measurements. Now we're talking about actual measurements done by the Luftwaffe, repeatable, done multiple times, done with multiple pieces of equipment, done with multiple systems. Now, why is this important? Because it's called about repeatability. Now, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this, and there is a side tangent that I found interesting, and knowing what I know about you, Mike, you might find interesting as well.
Yeah.
The rest of the audience, well, I could care less. But anyway, so let's talk about this real quick. So I translated this table into this, and I translated this up here into this. So this is the range of the VHF guidance beams over sea at 5,000 meters or 4,000 meters altitude. Obviously, I can't read. So chances are this was done over Stolzberg because Stolzberg is the closest to where it's only sea in front of it. It has a very limited amount of ground between it and the North Sea, and it's at an elevated position. So therefore, it's it's the prime candidate that they would use for targeting and stuff like that. It's not like you can just throw this up somewhere and say, "Hey, I'm going to throw this on the coast of Denmark. Hope no one notices it."
Yeah.
Remember, it's a football field. And shoot it out over the North Sea and do some quick testing and hope no one catches us. No, this is obviously they're going to use an existing antenna. Stolberg is one of those. So this was done by the chief of the NVW and the LC4. Well, what the fuck do those mean, right? It's like these are some of the questions that we have. Well, let's just think about this for a second. So when we look at these, sorry, I'm trying to find my notes for this. So the NVW and the LC4 are actually different parts of the Luftwaffe. Now, these are basically done. So the I'm trying to think. I'm trying to find where it is. It's actually the one is from the Signal Corps. The NVW is actually the Signal Corps of Measurements, and the LC4 is like the Luftwaffe Command Segment 4, which is also in charge of measurements and telecommunications, stuff like that. And this was done on. Remember, Europe does the dates weird.
Yeah. July
to
1st.
us, July 1st, 1939.
There you go.
And this is kind of important for the tangent. So what they did here, and like I said, over here, I just kind of translated. We have the LFF, which is the Lorentz system, which transmits at 500 watts. We have the FF and FD low, which is basically the, let's call it the low end of the transmitter for Knickerbein originally. And it has a 0.2, and then we have FF and FD, which is 3,000 watts. That's that power consumption of 21 kilowatts. This is the large Knickerbein system.
Yeah.
Here's our beam divergence. Remember, the beam divergence is how wide the beam spreads horizontally as it goes over distance.
Yes.
Remember, we talked about energy bundling. Here's that 164 that we were talking about as far as the directionality of the antenna and how it uses those that stack to basically send the signal out. And then we have ranges, and these ranges are based on the FUBL1. Remember, that's the receiver without change. And they have what we call a stick or a whip antenna. And then we also have a hanging antenna, which is a hanging wire antenna.
Right.
Then we have an FUBL1 with coupled feedback. Call it an improvement. Call it release 1.5.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe it's coupled feedback could be an extra loop through a magnet for signal processing, or it could be an extra vacuum tube or something like that. And then we have measurements for those for a stick antenna and hanging wire antenna. Then we have something called special device. Now, obviously, I can't find shit about special device. My personal observations, my personal opinion of this would be something like the FUBL3, which is the military version of the BL2, which is a civilian version of an improved BL1.
Okay.
So call that version 2.0.
Perfect.
Right? And it has what they call a trans antenna and a hanging antenna. Now, the trans antenna would be the equivalent of, let's say you take an airplane and you take a wire that goes from wingtip over the fuselage to the other wingtip. That's a transaxle antenna. So therefore, it has more larger area to be able to take it. But again, it depends on polarity and all this other fun stuff and things. All those variables we talked about previously.
Right.
Then all these numbers on here are about the distances on which they min-max they received and what they called average, or what the highest signal was.
Okay.
So the LFF with a 1.5 beam divergence with a 1-to-1 energy bundling, which means no specific things on that. It got 270 kilometers via stick antenna, 370 versus a hanging antenna. Now, the advantages to a stick antenna versus a hanging antenna is a stick is like, remember those, like if you look at common modern day cars. They have that antenna off the back, like off the back, the top of the back window. That's a little like triangle.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Consider that like a stick antenna or what we call a whip antenna. Then there's the hanging. Then there's a hanging antenna, which is the wire antenna that gets let out the back. When it gets let out the back, it's completely like let out to certain size to where now you're not talking about fractions of wavelength. You're talking about total wavelength that can take it. So you have more gain. You have more. You're getting more signal to process the receiver to listen to it further to cut out the noise of the traffic of the what do you call it, the static and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you notice, these numbers get higher and higher and higher
Right.
as the receivers get better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the numbers, vertically, they get 500 watts, 500 watts. All right, these are kind of very similar.
Right.
The energy bundle is the same, but then you're like, holy shit, what the hell is this? This is all right. Well, this is a byproduct of this. It's a byproduct of more power and better directionality.
Right.
Well, Jesus Christ, 1,000 kilometers?
Yeah, that's huge.
So, but they also say at the bottom here that the range is likely to depend on the humidity and temperature of the air layers between, not just at, but between the transmitter and receiver, and that the range decreases as humidity increases.
Okay.
Why is that important? Because water vapor causes the signal to diffract.
Right.
Or
refract.
Or refract, and it causes more more signal loss and things like that. So the range isn't going to be as good if it was like a nice dry day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so let's say we shot this over a desert. Great, it's not humid, right? We get this extra length for the thing. Well, then we have a problem with dry land.
Right.
Is
the
the porous conductor outside of ice.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you lose that.
Yep.
I would rather have salt water over the length and have a more humidity than I would have dry land and no humidity.
Right.
Again, these are all the variables you have to consider when you're engineering this to start with before you even get out of the block to say, hey, can I have some money?
Yeah, exactly.
And again, VHF is not direct line of sight. It refracts, it diffracts, and things like it is what we call one of those shoulder frequency bands that kind of acts like the frequency below it and kind of acts like the frequency above it. And there's a reason why the military doesn't use it because of those variables that go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a tangent. Something interesting that I found was I was trying to find out how they did this testing. Did they put an HE 111 up with the receiver and basically do this over 3 different or 1, 2, 3, 6 different days?
Right.
Now, the problem if you do that, you do 6 different days, you have 6 different variables, right?
Exactly.
Temperature and humidity could change and all this other stuff, right? So when I was going through my research of this, I found something interesting. Now everyone remembers the Hindenburg, right? So that was LZ 128 or something like that. Well, it was filled with hydrogen, which is flammable and sort of burned. So the Luftwaffe kind of sort of stopped making any new Zeppelins, but the Zeppelins who were already being made, they decided to go ahead and might as well finish them kind of mentality.
Okay.
Now, Germany had, prior to 1939 or 1938, Germany had an agreement with the U.S. to buy helium from them, so therefore they can still use these as passenger vessels because they're going to be filled with helium, which is a noble gas, so it's not flammable.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm sorry, not that it's noble gas, it's inert, but it's not flammable like hydrogen, which is also noble gas, but it's not flammable. But then, they decided to do things like, I don't know, invade Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria. So the U.S. said, no, we're not giving you, we're not giving you any helium.
Right.
So now they're like, well, shit, we got to fill this up with hydrogen. Well, if we do it with hydrogen, we can't carry passengers. It's like, it's going to kill us.
Quite a liability.
Or kill them. It's going to kill everyone on it. And yes, big liability. So they decided, hey, why don't we do something else? Why don't we actually turn it into an electronics intelligence platform? We take the area that would be for the passengers and we pack it full of radio receivers. We put a bunch of antennas on this. Now, you can't put it on the dirigible itself because it's a metal framework. But they used to have used to have this like mini dirigible that used to hang out from underneath the basket at the bottom. And what it is during World War I, is the dirigible would sit above the clouds and they would drop this basket down below the clouds, and they would do optical observations of like battlefields and stuff like that, and radio the information in. So this way you don't see the big dirigible, and you only see this little thing that's harder to see because of the resolution and stuff, right? Well, let's put a bunch of antennas on that instead of a person, and let's cable them all up, and we can put all these types of antennas on that one little dangling bit. We can use all these different types of receivers all at once and get the readings all at once. And it's a platform that can maintain altitude very easily at 4,000 meters. Remember, because this is all at 4,000 meters.
Yep.
It can do them all at once. And it's already designed for this. And we're at the same time, we can listen in to see what is going on over Britain to see if A, our frequencies are being used, so there be interference, and B, maybe what their capabilities are. There's a whole write-up on the LZ-130 and the Graf Zeppelin II and how it was used for electronics intelligence prior to the Battle of Britain.
Wow. Wow.
Again, one of those rabbit holes you get down to. I had never heard of this. Like, I have heard of Battle of the Beams and Kanikabine and stuff like that as part of my training in cryptology, because it's about electronic warfare and different ways that they combated it. And as an operator, I need to know what electronic warfare is going to do to my systems, and how do we counter those countermeasures, right? It's always about they're countering us, we have to counter their counter, and then, it's like a boxing match.
Yeah.
So all this information was available, and I was like, wow, this is really cool that this is going to work. So after all this, let's talk about what the reality of the Battle of the Beams is, and specifically about Kanikabine. Kanikabine was an ingenious adaptation of an existing blind landing system. It was the opening salvo of a secret war between scientists and engineers against each other. It played a small role overall, but a very significant role nonetheless. It proved the value of science and technology and innovation and intelligence, that they were just as much weapons as the Spitfire, the Churchill tank, and the Vickers machine gun. When you consider the innovation of this specific battle, radar went from a very large ground-based antennas 100 meters high for the home chain network in UK to an aerial platform capable of leading interceptors to bombers without a ground relay.
Wow.
We're talking about in the span of a couple years, less than a decade.
Wow.
Talking about like 3 to 5 years that they did this.
Jesus.
Large, again, it's, what is it? The necessity is the mother of all innovation. Well, war is pretty much a necessity if you have to win. Survivability, right? So this is where most of our innovations happen. Unfortunately, during a time of war.
Right.
I mean,
you have a lot of motivation to figure shit out real quick.
You kind of do. So largely, and the Battle of the Beams is an unknown battle. It is known only to specific groups and niches with interests in fields of like radar and radio and electronic warfare and signals intelligence. And Kanikabine, again, is a small point. We didn't even talk about the development of radar. We didn't talk about the Oslo report and some of the other intelligence that happened and things like that. There's a whole other aspect to this that kind of keeps on going. And if anyone even finds this remotely interesting, I recommend going down that rabbit hole and learning about the Battle of Beams, because it's highly entertaining, at least for me. But I'm a nerd, so what do you expect?
Well, there's a book on it too, right? You said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's multiple books, but there's a book specifically called Battle of the Beams by Tom Whipple. And it does a great job. It does a great job about talking about R.V. Jones, what he battled, the intelligence aspect of it, the scientific knowledge gap that we talked about, the radar innovations. Like radar in the UK was basically, because of the people who were on the committee, was basically during its onset was given a low priority, because the UK wanted to concentrate on what they called acoustic mirrors, infrared, and spotlighting. They thought radar was not, what's the word I'm looking for? It was not comprehensive enough. It was not accurate enough to be able to do it. So therefore, let's not worry about it. Well, they replaced the person who was in charge of the committee, who ended up being actually the chief scientific advisor to Churchill, and was actually the gatekeeper that actually R.V. Jones had to convince to identify that Kanikabine could have been possible. They replaced him with Appleton, who won the Nobel Prize for the ionosphere and everything else. And as soon as they replaced this one guy, Linderman, with Appleton, all of a sudden radar became a higher priority. And luckily it did, because they were able to get it operational before World War II.
Very cool.
So, but I mean, these are we're talking about like little steps, little variables that anything could have changed along the way. You could have had a different result. And that's the interesting part about it. So, but the interesting thing is that, it's, when you consider the innovation, you consider the amount of variables that had to be overcome for this, for the engineering of it, the finding of it, the basis all on a flat earth proof, to me, is just ludicrous by all means. And to be honest, because it's an unknown battle, maybe we should, maybe thank Flat Earth for kind of bringing us back into the spotlight?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, let's not do that.
Well, I mean, we got to listen. Flat Earth. If Flat Earth didn't exist, then, or the Flat Earthers didn't exist, then
you're right. Something like this would
be.
Something like this would fall by the wayside unless you're a radio operator.
Yeah, and I never
you would never hear about it.
Yeah. So actually, I don't know if this would be okay, but MC Toon actually, I don't know if he's actually going to come in, but he might want to come in real quick and talk with you on this, because he has some he says I have a little depth in that topic. So yeah, MC Toon.
Well, he has the degree in electrical engineering. So obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, he can talk about ERIP or ERP and stuff like that, about antennas and things like that and stuff like that. I mean, I've talked to him before on X, so I'm very familiar with this. And obviously, I go to his channel a lot. So yeah, by all means.
And CJ, oh my God, with another 5 gifted subs, or memberships, my bad. Jeepin Reefer, Carl Christensen, Christoph Zalewski, Tenucci Trump, and Jay Denaki have all been gifted memberships. Thank you so much for that, CJ, and enjoy your emotes, guys. My nice flat Earth emotes. All right, cool. All right, yeah.
Well, and here's one thing there's, like I said, when we talk about the intelligence and different things that R.V. Jones used to convince Churchill, it's almost implied by the flat Earth that because Germany knew it was flat and because the UK thought it was a globe, that somehow or another R.V. Jones was able to use scientific and intelligence and research, or scientific research and intelligence, to convince them that these beams are there. So either this research exists and they just can't find it, or B, did R.V. Jones read zetetic astronomy to Churchill to convince him that the Earth is flat, and that's why they were able to win the war? I mean, come on, this is getting ridiculous on different implications here. But the obvious conclusions are either so let me actually go back one is experience is the teacher of all things, meaning if you actually do shit, you learn shit.
Yeah, that's how I got my job. I got my job by experience. I have no schooling in my career.
I don't have a degree.
Yeah, I don't have a degree. I never went to college and here I am. I don't have any certifications.
I don't need it.
And
I have one. I have 2 vendor specific ones. So yeah. I have a Juniper and a Sienna one, but that's it.
Yeah. And so, but here we are. Experience is what got me my current job that I have now. Like it was funny because the other day I'm somebody in the warehouse was like, so, how did you, so what schools did you go to? Like, what kind of schooling did you get? I was like, the School of Hard Knocks, I guess. I don't know.
I tell, I started in the field doing field ops, doing installs at customer services and stuff like that. And I had other experiences prior to that, but that's where I started in the company. And then I started in the knock. Then I went outside in the field. So I went from answering alarms and answering customer complaints to going in the field, installing it. Then I went to the provisioning of the network. Now I'm in the engineering and the planning of the network. And now I'm in cost savings, where I'm trying to save the company a shit ton of money so that way we don't go broke.
Yeah, there we go.
But this is really the second to last slide, and we'll talk about this real quick, is obvious conclusions. They make assumptions and calculations that are fundamentally flawed, pure and simple. There's no way to go about this. Hopefully in this presentation, if you're still here with me, thank you. I'm sure you're just as happy it's over with as I was happy that it finally ended when I finally got through my last slide of creating this.
We have 130 viewers, and it's been pretty consistent the whole time. So
I'll take that for what it's worth. So, but it's those calculations of 400 to 500 yards is the linchpin of their entire claims. And we have learned, I hope, I've demonstrated that you kind of got to take that with, I don't know, a metric ton of salt. And they looked at one system, the signal, and failed to understand it and said it doesn't work. But they ignored everything else. And by everything else, I mean the engineering, the difference of equipment, the site criteria, the network, the system criteria, actual measurements that were available to them, antenna design, radio propagation methods, all these stuff. And they were duplicitous in their measurements, because why did they give us the benefit of the doubt for 200 meters when we really didn't need it? Why didn't they use exact measurements?
Right.
Maybe because they didn't understand what they were looking at in the graph.
I'm about to join them.
Oh,
Hey, how you
hey.
doing, Mike? Well, Mike 1 and Mike 2. You guys are like thing 1, thing 2.
Hello.
Hey, what's up? What's up, Tune? How you doing?
Hey. All right. I'm live and I gotta get you on my screen.
All right.
So give me a second.
No problem.
And then I can chat.
Perfect.
There we are. Okay. Okay. We're all good. How you doing?
How you doing, Mike?
Oh, it's awesome. I saw just I'm like you're live and I'm like, I gotta watch this. And it's really cool. The conversation is just too good.
Right?
Yes.
Well, this is the
Because they think it's so
Brandolini's.
much. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they think it's a silver bullet, and the ultimate Brandolini's principle is I spent 2 months putting this together because I have a full-time job, so I couldn't
Yeah.
devote all my time to this.
Yeah, they
And
don't have any jobs.
right, exactly, and they can just say, "Oh, it doesn't work," without any proof. Like Alan said, that diffraction doesn't proof in your latest debate,
Yeah.
with no proof. Meanwhile, I'm like, okay, I know Toon, and I know that McKeegan both said it was diffraction, but let me expand upon that because this is kind of like more my wheelhouse, and I'll teach them. Let's use this as a teaching moment
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good
because they
stuff.
beg to be taught.
They couldn't hear you over here. Now they can.
There you
Oh,
go.
okay. So basically, they omitted a bunch of shit. They lied about a bunch of shit. Pure and simple.
Oh, yeah.
End all be all. What happens with this whole thing and the silver bullet, the thing that can't be refuted? I think I hopefully provide enough information for any reasonable, and I use that as a caveat, reasonable person to believe that I refuted it. And the end result is the Earth is a sphere. Globe wins again. Because when we look at this, is why does the lower audibility limit rise with distance, documented by the Luftwaffe, who designed the system based on historical documentation? It provides evidence of the curvature. Globe wins. And I will stop sharing so I can go back on wonderful screen and oh, whoops, I closed the wrong one.
I gotta say, Dan, that was an incredible, absolutely incredible presentation that you set forth. I learned so much. I mean, not enough to be able to my retention of information is pretty low, but I have a better understanding of what all that actually, like, there's a lot more that goes into it than other than like, oh, it's direct light or direct sight. That's how it works. But
right. But you know what? And I'll make this presentation and I'll make everything else available on the unfornicated Google Drive, and I'll drop links in your Discord server, Mike.
Perfect.
Well,
yeah, because I want to put it in the description of the
PDS,
video. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. So, Toon, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I didn't watch the whole presentation, so I will definitely need to review it.
Yeah.
But I did see, I saw just as I was setting up, I'm like, let me listen in. So I was clicking around, I heard a few things and I mean, I know Dave actually set me straight in when we were in not Antarctica, in Punta Arenas.
I brought that up actually.
Yeah. So I had, based on some stuff, thought that it was reflecting off the ionosphere, but after looking at it more, like it couldn't have done that. The angles are wrong. They would have, the bouncing would have been too far away.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, and on top of that, when we do things like in cryptology and SIGINT, we do things like HFDF as part of the Navy. When we do HFDF, it does bounce off the ionosphere. So there is a certain algorithm that we use to correct, which was actually first postulated and published by Eckersley of all people, about having to
in the 30s.
right, exactly, to account for that error correction and everything else. But we've been doing HFDF since the 1930s. For over almost 100 years now. We know what the error is. We know how to do it. We know how to do it. So even if we did do that, which we know that the radiation, due to the antenna radiation and the grazing ray and stuff like that, we know that wasn't the method. But even if it did the method, we know that we can account for that because it's been studied.
Yeah.
It's not like the ionosphere is fake. They didn't make it up to for Marconi to say that he reached across the ocean.
Yeah, and the fact that it's weather dependent instead of being 100% this all the time tells you that it's not line of sight. There's something changing it and making it possible or not possible to happen.
Well, and not to mention it, they bombed Derby 6 times. That means it's dependent on atmospherics. It's dependent on whether or not they can reach that far. Otherwise, they would have bombed it a hell of a lot more times. I mean, that's not too much
And
of a leap
they
of
weren't
faith.
that successful.
No, they never hit. They only hit the Rolls Royce building once, and that was during a day run by a Junker Ju-88.
I have that book. So the book by Tom Whipple you were
Yep.
talking about, I have that on order. It will arrive while I'm in Florida.
Actually, let me share one more thing with you guys. Here, you remember we talked about different things that different softwares that we use and stuff like that. This is from
Oh,
VOA
yeah.
Cap.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to show
So,
that.
so there's certain things that we can only model because I can't model a 90 meter by 30 meter antenna with a 3,000 watt transmitter. It's kind of like, it's kind of niche. So as we look at this, this is something Bull Knight from Discord helped me out with. Basically, what we have is he used 28.2 megahertz, was just a little smaller than the 31 megahertz that we used. He used 2.4 kilowatts as opposed to 3,000. He also used constant wave, which is basically a radio signal that's constantly transmitting as opposed to pulses. He used a 7-element 20 meter antenna, which is a directional antenna. And he included the same thing for the receive in the effort of trying to make up the difference from the transmit to the receive. And we had a noise level of neg 153 dB. This is what we do for measurements and things like that. So when we look at this, if we look here on the color code on the side, we're looking at, let's say, 50, 60, 70%.
Do you want to share that? It's not shared.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because I can't fucking... I can't. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Toon. My language. I'm a sailor. I'm a former sailor. My language deviates quickly.
Here, I got you. There you go.
All right. So cleave is right here. So this is 100% coverage here. And when we talk about ionosphere propagation, this is all this out here. This 10% here. Do you know what's kind of like maybe just on the other side of this? What might
That's
be
the
right
Alps.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah,
It's the
mountain
Alps.
range.
That might cause problems. And also it creates problems because it doesn't go out here. But when you go away from the Alps, look, you got coverage all the way over here.
Wow.
But when we zoom into, Derby is right around here. We're talking about it's only 60, 70%. Now, this is done in November. This is done with as much as we could possibly get, as close as we possibly get to what the actual Connecticut Bind system was. We're talking about 60, 70% of reliability. If it was 100% reliability for a year long, they would have bombed it a hell of a lot more times than 6 times. And again, that 6 times is based off of things like the actual UK National Archives listing of 33,000 different bombings within the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, and they were months apart as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And the last thing I'll put in, and actually Mike too might appreciate this, is I used a tool to actually create the link budget. So the link budget started with the latitude and longitude of Cleve and latitude and longitude of Marble Hall. We started with an antenna height of 91 meters, which is the center of the antenna. And then we did the 6,000 meters for the Heinkel HE111. We looked at a transmit power, 3,000 kilowatts, translates to about 65 dB. We included a line loss. We assumed that they used obviously low loss cables between these two because they needed to. We inferred kind of because of directionality and everything else of the antenna, about 25 dB. It could have been 20, it could have been 30, it could have been somewhere in there. 25 seemed to be a good number to use from my experience. And we also include the receive antenna gain for the hanging wire. And we also include the receiver sensitivity, which is actually 1 to 2 microvolts for the FUBL1. And we calculate all that and does it for us. We see that there is a loss of about 117 dB across free space. So that's just atmospherics loss. Obstruction loss is 15 dB, forest and the urban loss. So statistical loss, let's call it overhead, just to be sure. So the total path loss is 152 dB. That means the fade margin, meaning the amount of stuff from where the receiver of the FUBL1, from where it could hear the signal to where it could not hear the signal, basically, talk it as a yes or no answer, really, is almost 45 dB, which means that is the equivalent of, yes, you can go 1,000 kilometers with this because of this fade margin. Call it it's the extra buffer you have before it doesn't become actually audible anymore.
Jesus.
So now I in the debate that I had with Alan, I'm sure he presented this type of analysis, but I must have missed it.
No, I watch your debate, and like they say, and like their measurements are based entirely on, and like you'll see this when you go into it, like when you go back into it and things like that. But when you go back to the actual things, is here's the things that I want you to look at, Mike. Is this um when we talk about measurements versus observations, it was measured once. They used a 400 to 500 degree yard wide observation.
In England?
In England,
Yeah.
at Spalding. So they used an airframe that was all windows. They used a civilian AC powered receiver that had to be converted to DC power to be used in this airframe. They had to be spliced into existing antennas that weren't necessarily VHF qualified at the time, that weren't designed specifically for the system. They had no specific training. And when we look at the actual, we also have things like EM shielding versus the Luftwaffe versus no EM shielding with the civilian antenna, because again, it's designed to be ease of use in someone's kitchen.
Yeah.
Well, it's not to be used in a plane at 12,000 feet. But when you look at the optical environments, you're talking about an audible tone. A guy with headphones is sitting in this right here with all these windows, with all these the exhaust from two twin engines, the wind noise and everything else, versus two armored bulkheads where the German radio operators sat and can listen into it.
Right, the difference.
The fact that they heard it at all is nothing short of a freaking miracle.
Good stuff.
That's pretty cool. So yeah, everybody go watch
Yeah.
on my channel. I got some people watching on mine. I'll link yours. I'll grab it. I'll put it in the description of mine to make sure that they
And Mike,
go.
I was actually telling Drunk Debunk Mike that remember you and I talked about the cold moonlight on X. I have the same name, Dano, under that social media. So we talked, a couple times about the my daughter and I doing that cold moonlight thing. So we talked a few different times, stuff like that. So we started that this winter, but it got cold and snowy and stuff like that in New York. So we decided we're going to wait till spring and summer to do that again.
That's really cool. I wish that I could do something like that, but I live in like a city-ish area. So like I wouldn't be able to tell what is moonlight versus what's street light.
Well, yeah, I grew up in LA where, streetlights came on, you went home, like there is nothing but light. I don't remember seeing a star until I was like 22. It's like, so the idea is that we do live outside, and we're far enough outside New York City where we don't have to worry about light pollution. And there's a elementary school nearby who has a big open field. There's no structure within 30 meters of us. Nice. We can go set a table in the middle of it and, not have to worry about any of that mess.
Big Fish wants me to remind you that it's pronounced Darby.
Darby, I'm sorry.
Listen, we're Americans. We're Americans.
It's American.
Look, if you want it to be pronounced Darby, you put an A in there.
Exactly. Look, it's an American exceptionalism here, all right? It's Derby because there's an E. Yeah. Put an A in it and we'll start pronouncing it Darby, okay?
And please, running through London is the river Thames.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
You want us to pronounce it differently, spell it differently. Yeah, it's okay. They're all sleeping. They're all sleeping right now. We can.
It's called New England for a reason. We improved on the old England.
Yeah, and then if you wanted, if you change the A in Derby to Darby, then it's going to be Dobby. So it's if you live in Boston, the Dobby.
Yeah, but Mike, see, in Boston we say things like Worcester, and it's not pronounced anywhere near how it's spelled. So maybe we shouldn't throw in the stones in this case.
What about Leominster?
Oh, you mean the lost cities out there in the middle of nowhere? Yeah.
Oh, my dad lives in Leominster.
Does he have indoor plumbing and electricity?
He does. Well, I mean, he's not that far west.
Well, I didn't know how far outside of like Berlin and Leominster he was.
Oh yeah, no.
I mean, you get out there, it's like, Deliverance on banjos.
Yeah.
The New England version. So it's a little, it's more like Dropkick Murphys on banjos.
Well, that's Orange and west of Orange and Springfield. Right. Then that's anyway.
Yes, tune. In the Redneckville in Massachusetts, it's Dropkick Murphys on banjo, not anything else.
Yeah. I will listen to that.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Well, I hate to do this, but I gotta hop off. Dan, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I've been excited to have you on for the last month, 2 months?
We've been talking about a month, but it's been like scheduling, and then I got booted for Critical Think because his schedule is one day, and then but you bring on Debunks, and all of a sudden I got to listen to him and his. I mean, I almost wore a hat today, but I figured between Critical Think and Debunks, I can't wear a hat because those two have the monopoly on hats.
You can wear
There's no way.
You can wear this hat, the Mike Over IP camo hat. There you go.
I actually have the Swinging Friars Padres hat. So,
nice.
I was raised in California, so I still have allegiance to California teams.
Perfect. And too, thanks for hopping on. This is cool. Just have you 2 nights in a row. I feel like I'm monopolizing your time.
It's not that cool. I get me 7 nights in a row. It's just not that great. I gotta say it.
Hey, Mike, let me say your wall looks amazing. By the way,
yes,
you did a great job on that.
Yeah, your NASA studio is looking pretty good out back there. I like it.
It is. I don't know what you were talking about, NASA studio.
I got one for you because I live in New York and I'm from California. I have a Margaritaville, and because it's Dano, because that's my nickname to my kid. It's a Hawaiian shirt. That's what you're stuck with.
There you go. Okay.
No, I do not fit in Boston or New York by any means, but hey, I make it work.
Yeah. Well, you're a Red Sox fan, so that's all I care about.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I was in New York when they came back from 3-1, and I told all the Yankee fans to watch it. And when they all talked shit for the next, I don't know, week, when they came out the end and they lost in 7, I was like, hey, here's my shirt, Sox in 7. F you, buddy.
Love it.
Is this spinning ball sports?
Yeah, it's spinning ball stick sports, and touching bases and whatnot.
And they had a pitcher that just threw the ball just with no spin. So it just kind of just did God knows what whenever it wanted to. It had a mind of its own.
Yeah, especially when Lackey was a pitcher. All right, well I gotta
Wakefield too.
I gotta hop off, guys. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
Have a great
pleasure,
evening,
Mike.
guys.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Yep.
All right. Wow. Holy Jesus. Okay. Okay. Not how I expected that to end, but here we are. You might look like Clown Nico in that hat. Oh yeah. Well, listen, I got it because my buddy Andy, he's a hunter, so I was like, I put it on the shop for him, and then don't worry. I also have another hat that I lost, but check it out. Hold on, there's another hat. So if you get cold, you can get the Drunk Debunk hat. See that? Is the Drunk Debunk hat. Isn't that nice? All right, well, I gotta hop off. I'm just gonna, so I already set it to redirect to Tune's channel, so we're just gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna end the stream. Where are my headphones? I'm just gonna end the stream, and you guys are gonna go get directed right to MC Tune. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for all the super chats, all the gifted memberships. You guys are all fucking amazing, guys. Hit the like button on your way out. I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about the Drunk Debunk show. I have a lot more shows like this planned for the future. So if this was your cup of tea where you want to learn something and we want to debunk the flurfs, that's what we do here. I love you all, guys. I will talk to you guys later. Have fun in Jersey tomorrow. I will. I'm so stoked. Well, I'm leaving on Saturday morning, but I will have fun. My sister and I are super stoked. How about your Hunter Buddies solo ghost stream tomorrow night? I wish I wish, but I am actually going to be filming a CC type video about ghosts with my sister. So she doesn't know it until right now. So there we go. I will bring something French. Yes. All right, guys. I love you all. Enjoy the rest of your night.